The true origins of Gravity Falls and the beings that inhabit it predate human civilization by millions of years, long before any Pines family member set foot in the town, which means that every single event we think of as the story, the journals, and the portal and the triangle demon trying to turn reality inside out, all of that is basically the last 5 minutes of a cosmological horror show that's been running since before humans figured out fire. We're talking about a place where the fundamental rules of physics have been negotiable since the dawn of time, where interdimensional rifts opened and closed while dinosaurs were still figuring out their whole situation, where ancient civilizations rose and fell and left behind cursed artifacts and prophecies that would eventually ruin the lives of multiple generations of the same family. And the really wild part is that none of this was an accident. Gravity Falls, the town, the weirdness magnet, the place where gnomes form boy bands, and time travel is just something that happens on a Tuesday, exists because the barriers between dimensions are tissue paper thin there, and they've been thin there forever, which attracted things and those things stayed and they waited. This is a story about how a sleepy logging town in Oregon became the epicenter of a multi-dimensional apocalypse. How two 12-year-olds with a golf cart and poor decision-making skills ended up being the last line of defense against the unraveling of reality itself, and how all of it, to understand any of it, we have to go back to the very beginning, and I mean the actual beginning, not the summer of 2012 when the twins showed up, not the 1980s when Stanford Pines was doing his whole tortured genius routine in the woods, but back to when the universe itself was still working out the kinks and something went catastrophically wrong in a way that would eventually lead to a triangle with a top hat nearly destroying all of existence. And honestly, the fact that this is a real sentence, I have to say, tells you everything you need to know about where we're headed. Okay, so we're starting with the universe. Not a universe, mind you, but the universe, as in everything, all of it, right from the very beginning. And I mean the very beginning. Because millions of years ago, before anyone was even thinking about, being born or building a shack or having a triangular dream demon try to end all of existence, there was creation. And with creation came chaos, specifically the nightmare realm. Now you'd think a nightmare realm would be, a place where nightmares happen. But no, it's actually where nightmares come from. It's a dimension, a whole dimension. And it's not like our dimension with its pesky rules about physics and linear time and things not spontaneously turning into other things. No, the nightmare realm is pure, unadulterated madness. Think of it as the cosmic junk drawer, but instead of old batteries and twist ties, it's filled with screaming, non-Euclidean geometry and existential dread. It's a place of pure chaos, where reality is less a suggestion and more a fever dream. And it is from this glorious, terrifying, utterly nonsensical place that our main antagonist, the one, the only, Bill Cipher, hails. Bill, as you might remember, is a triangle. A very, very angry, very, very powerful triangle. And he's interdimensional, which sounds fancy, but really just means he can pop between different realities like you or I might pop to the grocery store, except with significantly more universe-ending potential. He originated from this nightmare realm, this dimension of pure, unadulterated chaos and madness. And here's where it gets very Bill, very quickly. See, Bill wasn't exactly a fan of his home dimension. You'd think a being born of chaos would revel in it, right? Embrace the screaming, the non-Euclidean geometry, the general lack of anything resembling a coherent thought. But no. Bill, despite being a creature of chaos, found his home dimension to be flat. And I don't mean geographically flat, like a pancake. I mean conceptually flat, spiritually flat, like a bad sitcom with no laugh track. He perceived it as having no future, no progression, just an endless, unchanging present filled with these screaming, mind-numbing creatures. Imagine being surrounded by an eternal chorus of existential angst, but it's all just noise. No nuance, no crescendo, just an unending, flatline shriek. I genuinely have no idea what these creatures were, or what they were screaming about, but given Bill's general disposition, I'm going to assume it was probably something profoundly annoying and repetitive, like a pop song stuck on a loop. But instead of Baby Shark, it's the futility of existence. So what does a powerful, interdimensional demon do when he's bored with his home dimension? He destroys it, obviously, because that's a perfectly rational response to ennui, right? Oh, my house is a bit drab. Guess I'll just incinerate it and everyone in it. That's Bill for you. He didn't just pack a bag and move out. He didn't just find a new hobby. He committed what I can only describe as dimensional patricide, but with significantly more fire and screaming. His motivation was simple, if utterly insane. He sought to escape its confines and spread chaos to others. Not just any chaos, mind you, but his brand of chaos. The kind that involves turning people into tapestries and making everyone's teeth fall out. The good stuff. And in his quest to escape the flat, boring, screaming confines of his home, Bill did something truly horrific, even by his own standards. His actions, this grand act of dimensional destruction, led to the incineration of everyone he'd ever known. Think about that for a second. Every single being, every single screaming, mind-numbing creature he had ever encountered in his entire existence, gone. Poof. Reduced to cosmic dust. And what's truly disturbing is that he seems to have absolutely no remorse about it. In fact, he brings it up with a sort of casual glee, like he's recounting a particularly amusing anecdote from his childhood. Oh, that time I wiped out my entire species. Good times. It really gives you a sense of his moral compass, which, for the record, points directly to more chaos, please. This act of self-immolation, this dimensional genocide, was a pivotal moment for Bill. It transformed him. He became a being of pure thought and energy, no longer bound by a physical form, or even a consistent form, within his own chaotic dimension. He was free. Free to traverse dimensions, free to be, well, whatever he wanted to be, as long as it involved being a triangular, all-seeing eye of pure, unadulterated malice. This is where he truly became the Bill Cipher we know, and love to be terrified of. He shed the last vestiges of whatever form he had in the nightmare realm, evolving into this ethereal, powerful entity. It's like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, but instead of a butterfly, it's a cosmic horror that wants to turn your insides into a funhouse mirror. Now, being a being of pure thought and energy, and having just blown up his entire home, Bill had a lot of free time on his hands, and a lot of space to explore. So what did he do? He discovered the existence of the multiverse. Because of course, there isn't just one universe. That would be far too simple, far too orderly, far too flat for Bill. No, there are many dimensions, many realities, many different flavours of existence. And Bill, with his newfound freedom and his insatiable appetite for chaos, began to travel between them. He wasn't just sightseeing, though. Bill's idea of a vacation involves a lot more existential dread and a lot less miniature golf. He began observing and manipulating events, dipping his toes, or rather his singular eye, into the affairs of various realities. Just little nudges here and there, probably. A whispered suggestion to a nascent civilization, a subtle shift in the cosmic currents. Nothing too overt at first, just sowing the seeds of discord, planting the idea of weirdness, seeing what kind of glorious chaotic harvest he could reap. This was his training montage, if you will, but instead of lifting weights, he was practicing interdimensional puppetry. He was honing his craft, learning the subtle art of cosmic mischief, all with the ultimate goal of finding a new dimension to call his own, and then presumably destroying that one too, because that's just how Bill rolls. He's a creature of habit, even if that habit is universal destruction. And this, my friends, is where the story truly begins to get weird. Because with Bill now a free-floating agent of chaos, it was only a matter of time before he stumbled upon a dimension that caught his eye, a dimension that had a certain spark, a certain vulnerability, a certain town called Gravity Falls. But we'll get to that, trust me. So at some point during his interdimensional wandering, Bill learns about Earth. And I want to be clear here, Earth isn't special because it's pretty or because humans are particularly interesting. Bill couldn't care less about humanity's potential or whatever. What makes Earth special is that it sits at a kind of cosmic intersection. The dimension containing Earth, which we can just call our reality or the physical universe, has what you might call thin spots, places where the membrane between dimensions gets weak. And Bill, being Bill, immediately recognizes this as an opportunity. Now, the show never explains exactly how Bill first discovers Earth. We don't get a scene of him flipping through some interdimensional catalogue and going, oh, that one looks promising. But we know from Journal 3 that he's been aware of Earth for a very, very long time, long enough that he's had his eye on it for millennia. And what he sees is a dimension that's stable, governed by consistent physical laws, full of matter that actually stays put, and most importantly, accessible. Because remember, the nightmare realm is falling apart. Bill needs a new home, but more than that, he wants a new playground. Bill's plan, and this is where his megalomania really shines through, isn't just to visit Earth, or even to rule it in any conventional sense. His goal is to merge the nightmare realm with the physical universe, to take our reality with its boring physics and predictable cause and effect and just pour chaos into it like paint thinner into a snow globe. He wants to create what he calls Weirdmageddon, though that specific term comes later. The concept is simple. Break down the barrier between dimensions, let the nightmare realm bleed through, and remake reality according to his own rules, which are, to be clear, no rules. Just chaos and fire and madness, and Bill getting to do whatever he wants forever. The problem, and there's always a problem, is that dimensions don't just merge on their own. There are barriers in place, natural laws that keep realities separate. Bill can't just knock on the door and walk in. He needs a crack, a rift, a weak point he can exploit and tear open. And so begins what I can only describe as the longest, most patient con in the history of the multiverse. Bill starts searching for the right dimension, the right moment, the right circumstances that will let him through. During this search, which probably takes thousands of years, Bill encounters other interdimensional beings. The show gives us glimpses of this. We know there are other entities out there. Time Baby, who rules over the distant future and apparently has some kind of jurisdiction over temporal anomalies. The Oracle, who shows up briefly in Journal 3 and seems to exist outside normal time. Various demons and monsters that Bill either recruits or destroys depending on his mood. And through all these encounters, Bill is learning. He's figuring out how different dimensions work, what their rules are, where their weak points might be. He also develops a reputation. By the time we get to the main events of Gravity Falls, Bill is known across multiple dimensions as bad news. Time Baby has him on some kind of interdimensional most wanted list. The Oracle warns against him. Even other nightmare entities seem to think he's too dangerous, too unpredictable, which is saying something when you're talking about beings made of pure chaos. Bill isn't just a threat to Earth, he's a threat to the entire multiverse, because if he succeeds in merging the nightmare realm with even one stable dimension, there's no telling how far the damage could spread. Reality itself could start to unravel. And here's where Bill's personality really becomes relevant to his plan. He's not just powerful, He's smart, smarter than almost anyone gives him credit for. He understands that brute force won't work. He can't just punch his way through the dimensional barrier. He needs to be invited in, or he needs to find someone on the other side who can open a door for him. This is why he starts studying not just the physics of dimensions, but the psychology of the beings that inhabit them. He learns how to make deals, how to manipulate, how to offer people exactly what they want, while hiding the true cost until it's too late. The deals are important. We learn later that Bill is bound by certain rules when it comes to deals. He has to keep his word, at least technically. He can twist the terms, find loopholes, interpret agreements in the worst possible way, but he can't outright break a deal once it's made. This suggests there are laws governing interdimensional entities that even Bill has to follow, which is fascinating because it means there's some kind of cosmic order he's subject to, even as he's trying to destroy all order everywhere else. Bill's search for a rift becomes increasingly focused. He's not just looking for any weak point anymore. He's looking for a specific type of dimensional vulnerability, something he can widen, something that, if torn open properly, would create a permanent gateway, large enough for the entire nightmare realm to pour through. And he needs it to be in a dimension that's stable enough to be worth conquering, but weak enough to actually breach. The other thing Bill is doing during this period is gathering allies, or henchmen, or friends, though Bill's understanding of friendship is pretty warped. He assembles a crew of interdimensional misfits and monsters, beings who are either loyal to him out of fear, bribed with promises of power, or just chaotic enough to think his plan sounds fun. We meet some of them later during Weirdmageddon. 8 Bull, Cryptos, Teeth, Pyronica, and others. They're not just random monsters. They're Bill's inner circle, entities he's been working with for potentially thousands of years. Through all of this, Bill is also just causing problems because he enjoys it. The search for Earth isn't a grim mission for him. He's having fun. He's making deals with random beings across dimensions, starting conflicts, breaking things, and generally being a menace, because that's who he is. The quest to find a way into Earth and merge the nightmare realm with reality isn't some tragic necessity for Bill. It's not a desperate act of survival. I mean, sure, the nightmare realm is dying, but Bill isn't sad about it. He's excited. He sees the whole thing as the ultimate prank on existence itself. And eventually, after searching for who knows how long, Bill finds what he's looking for, a dimension that's perfect, stable, accessible, and containing a specific location where the barrier between realities is naturally thin. A place where, with the right push, he could create exactly the kind of rift he needs. That dimension is ours, and that place is a small town in Oregon that will eventually be called Gravity Falls. Alright, so we've established that the universe itself is basically a cosmic game of whack-a-mole for Bill Cipher, which is already a lot to unpack. But let's rewind, and I mean way rewind, like thousands of years ago, back when the land that would eventually become Gravity Falls was just, well, land. Untouched mostly, by human hands, but definitely not untouched by weirdness, because even then, before anyone was even thinking about building a mystery shack, this place was already attracting, and probably breeding, some truly bizarre stuff. First up, literally thousands of years ago, we have the Gobblewonker. Yes, the Gobblewonker, the giant, vaguely Loch Ness Monster-esque creature made of old boat parts. Except, here's the kicker, the real Gobblewonker, the organic one, was already swimming around in the lake. We see its skeleton, right? Which implies it's been there for a very long time. So before any settlers, before any towns, before even the indigenous peoples we're about to discuss, there was a massive, probably ancient, aquatic beast just chilling in the lake. I have no idea what it ate, honestly, or how it got there, or why it looked so much like a cartoon monster. But it was there, and it was big, and it was definitely weird. This isn't even touching on the robot version yet. That's a whole other can of worms. Or rather, a whole other can of rusty gears. But the original organic gobblewonker just proved positive that Gravity Falls was a magnet for the inexplicable from the absolute jump. And it wasn't just the lake. The forests, even then, were home to creatures that defy any sensible explanation. Take the multi-bear, for instance. This isn't just a regular bear, mind you. This is a bear with multiple heads, each with its own distinct personality and a penchant for singing pop songs. We know he's been around for a long while, because he's practically an elder statesman of the forest. He's seen things, man. Probably things that would make even Bill Cipher raise an eyebrow. The multi-bear, like the gobblewonker, existed long before any human settlement. He's just a thing that lives in the woods. How did he get multiple heads? Was he born that way? Was it a magical accident? A curse? The show offers absolutely no explanation, which is both frustrating and, frankly, typical of Gravity Falls. It just is. And that isness of the weird, the fact that these creatures are just part of the natural landscape, tells you everything you need to know about the inherent magical properties of this place, even in its most ancient past. It wasn't just a normal forest that became weird. It was always weird. Always. So into this already established landscape of multi-headed bears and ancient lake monsters arrived the indigenous peoples. Now, the show doesn't give us specific tribal names, which is a bit of a missed opportunity for some deeper lore, but it's clear that these were the first human inhabitants of the area. And unlike later settlers, who mostly stumbled into the weirdness, these folks were aware of it. From the beginning, they understood that this wasn't just any patch of forest. This was a place humming with strange energies. A place where the veil between worlds, if you will, was thinner than a discount paper towel. They recognized the mystical properties, the inherent strangeness, and they didn't try to ignore it or pave over it. They integrated it into their lives. This deep awareness led to a profound understanding of the local flora, fauna, and crucially, the supernatural phenomena. They weren't just hunting and gathering. They were observing, learning, and adapting to a world where a tree might suddenly start talking or a rock might float. They knew which plants had magical properties, which animals were more than they seemed, and where the pockets of particularly potent energy lay. This wasn't just survival. It was an intricate dance with the bizarre. They probably had names for things we've only seen glimpses of, entire taxonomies of weirdness that would make even Dipper's journal look like a grocery list. I mean, imagine trying to teach your kids about local wildlife when half of it glows or changes shape. That's a whole different kind of nature lesson. Because of this understanding, they established sacred sites. These weren't just pretty spots. These were places of power, places where the magic was particularly strong or particularly dangerous. They developed rituals, not just for harvest or hunting, but specifically to interact with, or more often, to ward off, the supernatural elements. Think about it. If you know there's a grumpy, gnomish king living under a particular rock, you probably leave offerings, or at least a polite note, rather than just building your campfire right on top of his mushroom circle. These rituals would have been incredibly complex, passed down through generations, a living encyclopedia of how not to accidentally unleash a dimension-hopping demon or annoy a sentient tree. They weren't just living in the weird, they were actively managing it. And this management extended to coexisting with various magical creatures and entities. Some, like perhaps the multi-bear, might have been seen as benevolent or at least neutral. Others, undoubtedly, were dangerous. We know from later lore that Gravity Falls is home to everything, from gnomes to shapeshifters to interdimensional beings. The indigenous peoples would have encountered all of them, or at least their ancient predecessors. They would have known which parts of the forest to avoid after dark, which mushrooms to definitely not eat, and which strange lights in the sky were best left uninvestigated. This wasn't a world of fairy tales for them. It was their everyday reality. Imagine having to explain to your child why they can't play near the Whispering Cave because it might steal their shadow. That's a very different childhood. Naturally, this deep knowledge and constant interaction led to the development of extensive oral traditions. These weren't just stories, they were warnings, they were survival guides, they were histories of encounters with the strange and the terrifying. They would have detailed the unique nature of the land, the rules of engagement with its magical inhabitants, and the consequences of disrespecting its power. These stories would have been vital, literally life-saving information, passed from elder to child, ensuring that the community remained safe and understood its place in this profoundly anomalous environment. I can only imagine the sheer volume of these stories, the intricate details of every weird creature and every strange phenomenon. It's a shame we only get glimpses of it through the lens of Dipper's journal, which is, let's be honest, a very modern and often bewildered perspective. They also observe the cyclical patterns of magic and anomalies within the region. This isn't just random weirdness. There's an ebb and flow to it. Certain times of year, certain lunar cycles, certain alignments might have brought an increase in magical activity or the appearance of specific creatures. They would have charted these patterns, understanding when the veil was thinnest, when certain portals might open, or when the gnomes were particularly active. This astrological or calendrical understanding of magic would have been crucial for planning, for protection, and for harnessing whatever benevolent energies they could. It wasn't just a chaotic free-for-all. There was an underlying rhythm to the madness, and they were the first to truly understand it. All of this meant that they learned to navigate and survive in the often unpredictable environment. This wasn't just about finding food and shelter, it was about knowing how to avoid being turned into a garden gnome, or having your mind swapped with a squirrel, or accidentally stumbling into another dimension. Their survival skills were on a whole other level, requiring not just practical wilderness knowledge, but also a deep understanding of metaphysical dangers. They weren't just living in the wilderness, they were living with the weirdness, a constant, unpredictable, and often dangerous companion. And through all of this, they developed a profound spiritual connection to the land. They recognized its inherent power, not just as a resource, but as a living, breathing entity, a source of both wonder and peril. This wasn't just a place they lived, it was a part of them, and they were a part of it. This spiritual reverence would have informed every aspect of their lives, from their art to their social structures, creating a culture deeply intertwined with the unique magic of Gravity Falls. Finally, they created art and artifacts depicting the strange creatures and events they encountered. We see glimpses of this later, in various ruins and hidden caches, but imagine the sheer volume of it. Petroglyphs of multi-headed bears, pottery adorned with images of glowing eyes in the forest, carvings of strange triangular beings. These weren't just artistic expressions, they were records, they were warnings, they were ways of communicating their experiences and their knowledge to future generations. These artifacts are, in a way, the very first journals of Gravity Falls, long before Stanford Pines ever set foot in the place. They are the earliest testament to the fact that this place was, is, and always will be profoundly, wonderfully, terrifyingly weird. And it all started thousands of years ago, with the first people who dared to call this strange land home. So these people aren't just surviving in Gravity Falls, they're thriving, and they've figured out something that literally every character who shows up later completely fails to grasp. You don't fight the weirdness, you work with it. They maintained a balance with the supernatural forces, and the key word there is balance, because they understood that you can't eliminate the anomalies, you can't seal them all away, you can't pretend they don't exist. The forest is going to do what the forest does. The creatures are going to creature. Your job is to not make it worse. And they got really, really good at this, The indigenous peoples developed an encyclopedic knowledge of specific magical plants and their uses, which, I cannot stress this enough, is the kind of thing you only learn through trial and error. And I'm guessing there was a lot of error. We're talking about plants that don't follow normal botanical rules. There are roots that glow under moonlight and can be used to ward off certain entities. There are flowers that bloom only during magnetic anomalies and have medicinal properties that work on injuries caused by supernatural creatures, which is oddly specific and suggests someone got mauled by something weird and then desperately tried every plant in a 5-mile radius. There are mushrooms that, when prepared correctly, can temporarily allow you to see things that exist slightly out of phase with normal reality, which sounds like a great way to lose your mind, but apparently they had a whole protocol for it. Trained seers or shamans would use these under controlled conditions, always with others present to pull them back if things went sideways. The really impressive part is they mapped all of this. They knew which plants grew near which anomalies, which combinations were safe, which were absolutely not safe under any circumstances, and they passed this knowledge down through oral traditions and probably some form of written or symbolic record that we'll get to in a minute. This wasn't superstition, this was applied supernatural botany, and it worked. They also knew about the interdimensional rifts. They were aware of the portals, not in a theoretical way, not in a maybe there are other dimensions philosophical sense, but there is a specific cave on the North Ridge where reality gets thin and sometimes things come through, practical sense. They knew where these weak points were located. They knew when they were most active, usually tied to celestial events or magnetic fluctuations, and they knew not to mess with them. This is crucial. They didn't try to open the rifts wider. They didn't try to seal them permanently. They just marked them, monitored them, and stayed clear when necessary. There's evidence, and by evidence I mean the stuff that gets referenced in Journal 3 and some of the ancillary materials, that they had specific protocols for rift activity. If a portal started acting up, there were designated people whose job was to keep others away from the area until it stabilized. They treated interdimensional rifts the way we treat downed power lines, which is honestly a very sane approach that approximately 0 people in the modern Gravity Falls timeline will follow. And this all ties into something bigger, which is that they understood the importance of respecting the land's mystical boundaries. Gravity Falls isn't just weird, it has rules and it has borders. Invisible lines you don't cross. Certain areas were considered too dangerous for habitation, not because of physical hazards, but because the supernatural activity was too intense or too unpredictable. There were places where the barrier between dimensions was permanently thin, places where the magnetic anomalies were so strong that compasses spun backwards and people reported lost time, places where the forest itself seemed aware and hostile. The indigenous peoples marked these boundaries, probably with cairns or carved symbols, and they respected them. You didn't hunt past this ridge. You didn't gather plants in that valley. You didn't build shelters near that particular grove. And the reason they knew to do this is because they had stories, oral histories passed down through generations of ancient beings or spirits that predate their arrival. They weren't the first intelligent creatures in Gravity Falls, not even close. The stories describe things that don't fit into any normal category. Entities that existed before humans arrived in the Pacific Northwest, maybe before humans existed at all. Some of these beings were benevolent, or at least neutral. Others were explicitly dangerous. There are references to a watching presence in the deep forest, something old and vast that didn't communicate in any recognizable way but seemed to be aware of human activity. There are stories of shapeshifters, not the specific shapeshifter we'll meet much later, but a whole category of entities that could alter their form. And the stories emphasize that you could sometimes identify them by their eyes, which never changed. There are tales of something that lived in the lake, something that wasn't quite a creature and wasn't quite a spirit, and the protocol was simple. Don't swim in the deepest parts, especially at night. The fact that these stories predate the indigenous people's arrival means they were either passed down from even earlier groups, which raises the question of how long humans have been in Gravity Falls, or they were learned through direct experience, which means these ancient beings were still active when the first people showed up. Either way, the takeaway is clear. The weirdness is old. Older than any human presence, older than any human understanding. So with all this knowledge, all these protocols, all this accumulated wisdom about how to live in a place where the laws of physics are more like the suggestions of physics, the indigenous peoples developed unique hunting and gathering techniques adapted to the magical ecosystem. You can't hunt in Gravity Falls the way you hunt anywhere else, because the animals aren't normal. Some of them are smarter than they should be. Some of them have abilities that don't make biological sense. There are deer that can sense when they're being watched from over a mile away. There are fish in the streams that seem to phase in and out of visibility. There are birds that fly in geometrically perfect formations that hurt to look at too long. The hunting techniques adapted to this. Traps were designed not just to catch animals, but to account for supernatural evasion. Certain herbs were used to mask not just scent, but some kind of psychic or magical signature that the animals could detect. Hunting parties operated under strict rules about where and when to hunt, because some areas were too close to major anomalies, and the animals there were too far gone, too changed by the ambient weirdness to be safe to eat. And yes, that's apparently a thing. There are animals in Gravity Falls that are so saturated with supernatural energy that consuming them would be, at best, a very bad idea. Gathering was equally complex. You couldn't just forage anywhere. Some plants that looked edible were actually toxic in ways that normal toxicology wouldn't catch. Some plants that looked toxic were actually safe, but only if harvested at specific times or prepared in specific ways. The indigenous peoples figured all of this out, catalogued it, and taught it to each new generation, which represents an absolutely staggering amount of accumulated knowledge. And they recorded it. They had a system for recording or remembering significant supernatural occurrences, because in a place like Gravity Falls, you need institutional memory. You need to know that 70 years ago, there was a spike in rift activity, and 3 people vanished near the canyon, so maybe don't go near the canyon when the stars align the same way. You need to know that there's a cycle to some of the phenomena, that certain events repeat on predictable schedules, lunar or solar, or tied to longer astronomical cycles. They used a combination of oral tradition, which is more reliable than modern people give it credit for, and physical records. Petroglyphs, carved symbols, woven patterns in textiles that encoded information. These weren't decorative, they were functional, a written language designed specifically to preserve knowledge about the supernatural. They were the first to witness and interpret the land's inherent weirdness, the first to develop a framework for understanding it, and that framework worked. They established a sustainable way of life in harmony with the strange environment, and that word, sustainable, is doing a lot of work here, because it means they could have kept going indefinitely. They had figured it out. They had cracked the code. They could live in Gravity Falls, raise families, build communities, pass on their knowledge, all while coexisting with the anomalies. And then Nathaniel Northwest showed up. The town of Gravity Falls, the actual town, was founded by Nathaniel Northwest. And I want to be very clear about something. He did not discover the area. He did not find virgin wilderness. He arrived at a place where people had been living successfully for potentially thousands of years and immediately made everything worse. Nathaniel Northwest accidentally cursed the land. And the word accidentally is important because it suggests he had no idea what he was doing, which tracks with literally everything else we know about him. The exact mechanism of the curse is never fully explained, which is frustrating but also very on brand for Gravity Falls. What we know is that Northwest was clearing land for the town, probably cutting down trees and disrupting the natural landscape in the way that 19th century American settlers did everywhere, and he either destroyed or desecrated something he shouldn't have. A sacred site, maybe. A boundary marker. Some kind of seal or ward that the indigenous peoples had maintained. Whatever it was, breaking it had consequences. The curse manifests in a lot of ways, and we'll see the effects play out over the entire timeline, but the immediate result was that it disrupted the existing balance. The careful equilibrium that the indigenous peoples had maintained for generations fell apart. The supernatural forces became more aggressive, more unpredictable. The anomalies intensified. The barriers between dimensions grew thinner. Northwest had essentially broken the dam, and everything the original inhabitants had worked to contain or coexist with came flooding out. And the indigenous peoples, they left, or they were driven out, or they died. The show doesn't give us details, which is probably for the best, because the historical reality of what happened to indigenous populations in the Pacific Northwest during the 19th century is grim, and Gravity Falls is ultimately a kids' show. But the knowledge they'd accumulated, the techniques they'd developed, the boundaries they'd respected, all of that was lost. Some of it survived in fragments, in symbols carved into rocks that later characters will find and misinterpret, in stories that got distorted as they were passed through non-Indigenous communities. But the living tradition, the practical, day-to-day understanding of how to live in Gravity Falls safely, that was gone. Nathaniel Northwest built his town on top of a civilization he didn't understand, broke a system he didn't know existed, and set in motion basically every problem that every subsequent character in Gravity Falls will have to deal with. So that's going well. So for thousands of years, Gravity Falls is just sitting there, doing its weird interdimensional thing, mostly bothering local indigenous populations and the occasional confused settler who wanders too close to the portal hotspots. And then in 1863, something truly baffling happens. The 8th President of the United States, a man named Quentin Trembley, the third Esquire, shows up and decides this is the perfect place to found a town. And I need you to understand that Quentin Trembley is not some footnote president you forgot from history class. He was actively erased from history because he was so catastrophically incompetent that the government just pretended he never existed. Trembley's presidency, which somehow squeezed itself between William Henry Harrison and John Tyler, was notable for exactly one thing: declaring war on pancakes. Not a metaphor. Actual pancakes. He found them suspiciously flat and believed they might be a threat to national security. This is the man who arrives in Gravity Falls, takes one look at the gnomes and the eye bats and whatever else is shambling around the forest and thinks, yeah, this is fine. Let's put a town here. The thing is, Trembley isn't stupid enough to think people will just accept the weirdness. He knows that if word gets out about what's actually happening in this forest, someone's going to ask questions he can't answer, mostly because he doesn't understand the questions. So Trembley does what any reasonable president would do when confronted with unexplainable supernatural phenomena. He declares the entire area a national park, just slaps that label on it and calls it a day. And the beauty of this plan, if you can call it a plan, is that national parks are supposed to be preserved and left alone. You don't develop them, you don't investigate them too thoroughly, you just acknowledge they exist and move on. It's actually kind of genius in the way that a broken clock is right twice a day. Trembley has created the perfect cover story. Gravity Falls isn't weird, it's just nature. It's rustic. It's Americana. Don't worry about the fact that the trees sometimes scream. Now Trembley knows he can't just leave a national park sitting around without someone in charge of it. And he's certainly not going to stick around himself. The man has a busy schedule of being terrible at governing to get back to. So he looks around for someone local, someone who already knows the area, someone he can trust to keep things running. And he finds Nathaniel Northwest. Nathaniel is a lumberjack, which in 1863 is about as local as you can get in a frontier logging town. He's got an axe, he's got a beard, presumably, and he's there. That's basically the entire hiring process. Trembley signs over the deed to Gravity Falls directly to Nathaniel. Just hands him the paperwork and says, "Here, you're in charge now, congratulations." And to make it official, to really cement Nathaniel's authority, Trembley gives him a golden hatchet. Not a normal hatchet that happens to be painted gold. A solid gold hatchet, which is possibly the least practical tool ever created. You can't actually chop wood with a gold hatchet, because gold is soft and would deform immediately, but it looks impressive, and that's what matters. It's a symbol. Nathaniel Northwest is now the official founder and proprietor of Gravity Falls, backed by presidential authority that technically doesn't exist, because Trembley himself will be erased from the records within a few years. And then Trembley leaves, just gets in his horse-drawn carriage and rides off into the sunset, or possibly into a ditch. It's genuinely unclear what happens to him after this. We know he eventually gets encased in peanut brittle and preserved in a secret government facility, but that's later. Right now, he's just gone, and Nathaniel Northwest is standing there, holding a golden hatchet and a deed to an entire town, and you can practically see the dollar signs appearing in his eyes like a cartoon character. Because here's the thing about Nathaniel Northwest. He is not a good person. He's not even a mediocre person having a bad day. He is driven by greed in the way that a shark is driven by hunger. It's just his fundamental operating system. The moment Trembley's carriage is out of sight, Nathaniel is already planning how to exploit every single resource this town has to offer. And Gravity Falls has a lot of resources. There's timber, obviously. That's his whole background. There's land. There's whatever weird supernatural nonsense is happening in the forest, and while Nathaniel probably doesn't understand it, he understands that rare things are valuable things. Nathaniel immediately begins stripping the area. He's cutting down trees faster than they can grow back. He's claiming land. He's setting up logging operations that would make a modern environmentalist weep. And he's doing all of this under the legitimate cover of being the town's founder, the man Quentin Trembley himself appointed. No one can question him, because technically he has presidential authority, even if that president was later retconned out of existence. It's the perfect scam, except it's not even a scam. It's just legal, and Nathaniel doesn't stop at exploitation. He wants everyone to know he's in charge. He wants a monument to his own importance. So he builds Northwest Manor. This isn't a house, it's an estate. It's a mansion that screams, "I have more money than you will ever see in your lifetime, and I want you to know it." The manor sits on a hill overlooking the town, which is a very subtle way of saying Nathaniel is literally looking down on everyone. It's got multiple wings, it's got grounds, it's got everything a robber baron could want in 1863, and this becomes his primary residence, his seat of power, the physical manifestation of the Northwest family's control over Gravity Falls. The manor itself is built with old-growth timber from the surrounding forest, which means Nathaniel is literally constructing his monument to wealth out of the same resources he's supposed to be stewarding. It's like being hired to guard a bank and immediately using the vault to build yourself a house. And no one stops him because, again, he has the deed. He has the golden hatchet. He has legitimacy, even if that legitimacy came from a president who declared war on breakfast foods. Nathaniel doesn't just establish himself as a wealthy landowner. He rewrites the entire narrative. He tells everyone, and I mean everyone, that he founded Gravity Falls. Not that he was given the town, not that he was appointed by a president, but that he personally founded it through his own pioneer spirit and rugged determination. He's erasing Quentin Trembley from the story before the government even gets around to erasing Trembley from history. And people believe him, because he's the one with the manor and the money and the power. That's how it works. The rich guy says he founded the town, so he founded the town. Congratulations, Nathaniel. You've invented historical revisionism. Anyway, so this land, already a magnet for weirdness, starts really kicking into high gear around this time, like the mystical equivalent of a teenager hitting a growth spurt. The anomalies, the strange properties, they just ramp up exponentially. It's almost as if the universe itself decided, you know what, this spot needs more bizarre. And of course the local indigenous population, who, unlike the newcomers, actually had a clue about the land's spiritual disposition, were well aware of this amplified mystical nature. They understood the delicate balance required to coexist with whatever cosmic shenanigans were happening underfoot. They weren't just living on the land, they were living with it, if that makes any sense. They probably had a whole system of spiritual practices and cautionary tales that kept things relatively stable, or at least kept them from accidentally summoning a sentient mailbox. I'm just guessing here, but given the sheer volume of weirdness we see later, it stands to reason they had some kind of handle on it. Then, because history just loves to repeat its most unfortunate patterns, along comes Nathaniel Northwest, and he, with all the grace and foresight of a charging bull, proceeds to displace this indigenous population. He just takes their land. No consultation, no, hey, maybe we shouldn't upset the people who understand the local eldritch energies, just a good old-fashioned land grab. This, as you might imagine, does not go over well. Not only is it a morally reprehensible act on its own, but it's also spectacularly stupid from a supernatural perspective. You don't just kick out the spiritual custodians of a place that's actively trying to manifest a gnome uprising. It's like evicting the only person in your apartment building who knows how to turn off the fire alarm. What Nathaniel thought he was doing, I genuinely have no idea. Probably just saw undeveloped land and dollar signs, completely oblivious to the fact that the land itself was probably teeming with invisible, glowy, potentially vengeful things. His disregard for the land's spiritual balance, and, more importantly, for the people who upheld that balance, was monumental. It's almost comical how little he seemed to care, or perhaps how little he understood. He probably thought spiritual balance was some kind of fancy tea. So naturally, this blatant disrespect and outright theft doesn't just make the indigenous people a little miffed, it makes them furious. And they decide that Nathaniel Northwest, and by extension, his entire lineage, needs a very specific, very magical, and frankly, very theatrical comeuppance. A shaman from the displaced tribe steps forward and places a curse upon the Northwest family. This isn't your garden variety, may your socks always be damp kind of curse. This is a capital C curse. It's intricate, it's specific, and it's got a built-in timer. The curse dictates that if the Northwest family ever refuses to open their lavish manor to the common folk, if they ever decide to be too exclusive, too snobby, too Northwest, then a monster will appear and destroy them. Not just inconvenience them, not just give them bad hair days, but destroy them. Like full-on, house-crumbling, family-ending destruction. It's a surprisingly democratic curse, actually. It demands that they share their wealth, their space, their privilege, or face annihilation. I almost have to admire the poetic justice of it. Oh, you think you're too good for us? Fine. Here's a monster. And what kind of monster, you ask? Well, it's not just some random demon pulled from the ether. Oh no, the curse is far more specific, and frankly, a little more local. The monster bound to this curse, and the Northwest family's fate, is a lumberjack ghost. Yes, a ghost of a lumberjack. Because, you know, gravity falls. It's never just a monster, it's always a themed monster. I imagine the shaman was like, okay, what's something that embodies the raw, untamed nature of this land, but also, like, has an axe? Perfect. This lumberjack ghost is essentially the supernatural enforcement arm of the curse. It's not just a spooky apparition, it's a living, breathing, well, not breathing, but you get the idea, consequence ready to swing its spectral axe should the Northwests ever forget their annual obligation. It's a wonderfully specific and almost darkly humorous touch. Imagine being a Northwest, knowing that your family's continued existence hinges on remembering to throw a party every year, or else a ghostly Paul Bunyan shows up to redecorate your mansion with splinters. Nathaniel Northwest, for all his earlier short-sightedness, actually takes this curse seriously, or at least seriously enough to be terrified by it. He might have been a greedy land grabber, but he wasn't completely oblivious to the supernatural threats that were now explicitly tied to his family's survival. So fearing the curse and the very real threat of a spectral lumberjack, he institutes a tradition, the annual Northwest Fest. This isn't some grand philanthropic gesture, it's a desperate act of self-preservation. Every year, to appease the curse and keep the lumberjack ghost at bay, the Northwest family throws open the doors of their opulent manor to the common folk of Gravity Falls. It's a huge party, a social event, but underneath all the pomp and circumstance, it's a yearly ritual to prevent their untimely demise. Think of it as a very elaborate, very expensive insurance policy against being ghost-axed. And this tradition, this yearly appeasement, continues for generations. Now, because the Northwest family are, well, the Northwest family, they can't just let the true story of their founding and the curse be known. That would be far too embarrassing. It would expose their original wrongdoing, their vulnerability, and the fact that their entire legacy is built on a magical threat. So they do what any self-respecting, image-obsessed, ridiculously wealthy family would do. They deliberately suppress and alter the true history of Gravity Falls' founding, and most importantly, the curse itself. They rewrite the narrative. They probably commissioned flattering portraits, wrote glowing and entirely fictional biographies, and generally scrubbed any mention of land theft, angry shamans, or spectral lumberjacks from the official record. They probably invented some heroic tale about Nathaniel bravely taming the wilderness, or something equally nonsensical. They want to be seen as the benevolent founders, the pillars of the community, not the terrified subjects of a magical ultimatum. This act of historical revisionism is crucial because it creates a massive disconnect between what the town thinks it knows about its origins and the terrifying magical truth. And that, my friends, is a ticking time bomb, just waiting for someone to accidentally light the fuse. The sheer audacity of it to literally rewrite history to save face is peak Northwest. It's not just a cover-up, it's a foundational lie that permeates the very fabric of Gravity Falls. So we have a town founded on a lie, built on stolen land, and protected by a yearly party designed to ward off a vengeful spirit. It's a lot to unpack, and frankly, it just gets weirder from here. We've got a growing pile of supernatural weirdness, a family with a very inconvenient secret, and a whole town oblivious to the magical strings pulling its most prominent family's actions. It's a delicate balance, and we'll see exactly how long it holds. Now, as for the lingering questions, how did the indigenous population know about the land's mystical nature? Were there other curses placed that we don't know about? What exactly was the lumberjack ghost's backstory? And why a lumberjack specifically? Was he just some random dude who got axed, or was there more to it? I genuinely have no idea. The show doesn't tell us, and frankly, it's a missed opportunity for some truly bizarre lore. Next time we'll dive into the mysterious origins of the town's most famous cryptids, the real story behind the Gobblewonker, and maybe, just maybe, figure out what's up with the gnomes. I'm thinking we could tackle the lore of Over the Garden Wall, Hollow Knight, or maybe even Don't Starve. Let me know what you think. All right, so we've got this whole interdimensional world-ending prophecy thing brewing, right? But before we get to any of that, before the twins even exist, before the journal is written, before all the weirdness really kicks off in earnest, we need to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Fiddleford Hadron McGucket. And yes, his middle name is Hadron. I don't know if that's a subtle nod to particle physics or just the writers having a laugh, but it's there. So, while Stanford Pines is off doing whatever brilliant, socially awkward thing he's doing at this point in his life, we're going to rewind a bit, probably back into the 1960s, maybe early 70s, to see what young Fiddleford is up to. Now, Fiddleford, even as a young man, he was a genius. Like a certified, off-the-charts, inventing things that shouldn't exist kind of genius. He wasn't just smart, he was innovative. He had this knack for seeing how things worked, or more accurately, how they could work in ways no one else could even conceive. We're talking about a guy who, presumably in his formative years, was already tinkering with incredibly advanced concepts. He wasn't building birdhouses, is what I'm saying. He was probably building, like, self-assembling birdhouses with integrated climate control and a tiny automated seed dispenser. That's the level of inventiveness we're dealing with here. And this brilliance, this almost preternatural ability to invent and understand complex machinery, is what eventually lands him at West Coast Tech, which, if you're keeping track, is a pretty prestigious university, implying Fiddleford wasn't just a backwards tinkerer. He had formal education, a structured understanding of advanced science, which just makes his eventual descent into, well, we'll get to that, trust me, all the more tragic. It's at West Coast Tech, this hub of burgeoning scientific minds, that Fiddleford's path finally, irrevocably, intertwines with Stanford Pines. Now, Stanford, as we know, is also a genius, a six-fingered, anomaly-obsessed, destined for greatness kind of genius. So you've got these two intellectual titans, probably the smartest two people in that entire institution, bumping into each other. And you can imagine it, right? Two absolute nerds, probably in some obscure lab, both working on something so far beyond the comprehension of their peers that they just naturally gravitate towards each other. They're probably the only two people who genuinely understand what the other is even talking about. And it naturally blossoms into a friendship, but not just any friendship. This is a friendship forged in the fires of shared intellectual curiosity and a mutual disdain for the mundane. They're not talking about sports or dating. They're talking about theoretical physics, advanced robotics, and the potential existence of alternate dimensions. You know, normal college stuff. During this period, Fiddleford is just churning out inventions. We're talking about a prolific period of creation for him, and a lot of these inventions are actually early forms of robotics. This is important because it shows his foundational understanding of complex systems, of artificial intelligence, of creating machines that can perform tasks with a degree of autonomy. He's not just building gadgets, he's building sentient or semi-sentient mechanical beings. Think about that for a second. In the 60s or 70s, while most people are still marvelling at colour television, Fiddleford McGucket is probably building a robot that can make him a sandwich, and then debate the ethical implications of its own existence. I mean, I genuinely have no idea what specific inventions he was making at this point. The canon is a little vague on the specifics, but the implication is that they were advanced, they were robotic, and they were numerous. This is a guy who just makes things. It's his nature. So, Stanford and Fiddleford, these two brilliant minds, become incredibly close friends, and crucially, collaborators. This isn't just a casual friendship. This is a partnership. They're bouncing ideas off each other, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and probably enabling each other's wildest scientific fantasies. Stanford, with his insatiable curiosity about the unknown, and Fiddleford, with his unparalleled ability to build anything Stanford can dream up. It's a perfect synergy, and it's this synergy that leads them down the path of researching anomalies and the paranormal. Stanford, having already had his own brushes with the inexplicable, probably ropes Fiddleford into it. "Hey, Fiddleford," I imagine Stanford saying, "I've been thinking about this weird thing that happened to me, and I have a theory about interdimensional rifts, and I need you to build me a device that can detect fluctuations in the fabric of reality." And Fiddleford, being Fiddleford, probably just says, "Hold my beer, I've got just the thing." Their research into anomalies isn't just theoretical. They're actively seeking out evidence, cataloguing strange occurrences, and trying to understand the underlying mechanics of the weirdness. This is where Stanford's journals probably start to take shape, at least in their nascent form. He's documenting everything, and Fiddleford is right there with him, probably providing the technical expertise to actually measure and interact with these anomalies. They're not just reading about ghosts, they're trying to build a ghost detector. They're not just hearing about cryptids, they're trying to build a cryptid tracking device. They're applying scientific rigor to the utterly unscientific, and it's exhilarating for them. This shared obsession, this mutual dive into the deep end of the paranormal pool, eventually leads them to a rather significant decision. They need to move to Gravity Falls, Oregon. Why Gravity Falls? Well, because, as we'll come to find out, Gravity Falls is basically a giant magnet for all things weird. It's a nexus of paranormal activity, a hotspot of anomalies, a place where the veil between dimensions is thinner than a cheap paper towel. For Stanford and Fiddleford, it's the ultimate research laboratory. It's like finding a gold mine for an aspiring prospector, except the gold is interdimensional beings and sentient gnomes. They're not just looking for weirdness anymore, they're going straight to the source. It's the logical next step for two men so consumed by the inexplicable. So they pack up their labs, their notes, their half-finished inventions, and they set up shop in Gravity Falls. And where do they set up shop? Not in some easily accessible, brightly lit lab. Oh no. They establish a secret laboratory beneath the Mystery Shack. Now this is a crucial detail. The Mystery Shack, even then, was probably just a rundown cabin, a tourist trap waiting to happen. But beneath it, hidden from prying eyes, they create their sanctuary of science and the supernatural. This shows a level of paranoia, or perhaps just extreme caution, from the very beginning. They know what they're dealing with is dangerous, or at least sensitive, and they want to keep it under wraps. And who better to help design and build a secret technologically advanced underground lab than Fiddleford McGucket? He's probably got blueprints for self-camouflaging walls and sound-dampening fields just lying around. And it's in this secret lab, beneath what would eventually become the most famous tourist trap in Gravity Falls, that their magnum opus begins to take shape. Fiddleford, the unparalleled inventor, helps Stanford build the portal to other dimensions. This isn't just a small device. This is a massive, complex, reality-bending contraption. It's the culmination of all their shared research, all their theories, all their combined genius. Stanford has the vision, the theoretical framework, the understanding of the interdimensional mechanics. But Fiddleford, he's the one who actually builds it. He's the one who designs the components, who wires the circuits, who makes sure the interdimensional flux capacitor, or whatever it's called, actually, fluxes. Without Fiddleford, that portal probably remains a theoretical pipe dream in Stanford's journals. He is absolutely indispensable to the project. This is the moment where their shared quest takes a truly monumental and ultimately catastrophic turn. They're not just observing anomalies anymore, they're actively trying to create one, to punch a hole in the fabric of reality itself. And as we'll see, that's rarely a good idea. And it's around this time, the late 1970s, that Fiddleford starts getting a really bad feeling about this whole interdimensional portal thing. I mean, you can kind of see his point. They're building a giant device that rips holes in reality, and Stanford's just like, nah, it'll be fine. Fiddleford, bless his cotton socks, he's trying to be the voice of reason here. He's raising legitimate concerns about the safety protocols, the potential for unforeseen consequences, the usual stuff you worry about when you're messing with the fabric of existence. He's probably saying things like, Stanford, are we sure about the structural integrity of the quantum flux modulator? Or perhaps we should run one more simulation before we try to open a gateway to other dimensions, just to be safe. Very reasonable, very Fiddleford. But Stanford, oh Stanford, he's got that academic tunnel vision, that singular focus that makes him brilliant, but also, frankly, a little bit reckless. He's so utterly consumed by the prospect of activating this portal, of finally proving his theories, that he just brushes Fiddleford's warnings aside. He's probably muttering about Fiddleford being a worrywart, or that science demands bold action, not timid hesitation. He's got the bit between his teeth, and he's not letting go. He's been working towards this moment for years, pouring all his energy, all his intellect, all his grant money into this one project. The idea that it might be dangerous, that it might be fundamentally flawed, it's just not computing for him. He's too close to it, too invested. He sees Fiddleford's caution as an impediment, not a safeguard. So, naturally, they activate the portal. Because of course they do. And for a brief, terrifying moment, it works. The portal roars to life, a swirling vortex of impossible colours and energies, and through it, Stanford makes contact. Not with some benign, helpful alien race, not with a dimension full of friendly, knowledge-sharing beings, but with Bill Cipher. Yes, that Bill Cipher, the triangular dream demon, the guy who eventually tries to turn the entire world into his own personal nightmare playground. Stanford, in his boundless naivete, sees Bill as a source of infinite knowledge, a benevolent, all-knowing entity who can help him understand the multiverse. He's completely oblivious to the fact that Bill is, a cosmic trickster demon with a penchant for chaos and a severe disregard for mortal well-being. Fiddleford is right there, witnessing this whole interaction. He sees the portal ignite, he sees Stanford's face light up with a mixture of awe and terror, and he sees the strange, unsettling glimpse of whatever lies beyond. He's probably got a really bad feeling about this, a feeling that goes beyond just structural integrity and into the realm of, oh dear, this is deeply, fundamentally wrong. And then, because the universe has a truly twisted sense of humour, Fiddleford gets accidentally pulled into the portal. Just for a moment, a fleeting, horrifying instant. He's probably standing too close, or maybe a stray energy surge just snags him, and poof, he's gone. He experiences a brief, terrifying journey through whatever cosmic nonsense lies on the other side. We don't get a lot of details about what he saw in there, which is probably for the best, honestly. I mean, given what we know about Bill and his home dimension, it probably wasn't a pleasant sightseeing tour. It was probably a kaleidoscope of madness, a sensory overload of things no human mind was ever meant to comprehend. He's probably exposed to glimpses of weird Mageddon, of Bill's true form, of the sheer, unadulterated chaos that lurks just beyond their reality. It's not just a physical displacement, it's a psychic assault. When he tumbles back out, he's not the same. Not even close. The experience shatters something inside him. He's traumatized, shaking, babbling incoherently. The brilliant, eccentric, but ultimately grounded engineer is gone, replaced by a terrified, paranoid wreck. He's seen too much, understood too much, and his mind just can't process it. He's probably trying to warn Stanford, trying to explain the horrors he witnessed, but it's all coming out as disjointed, frantic ramblings. He's seen the true nature of Bill Cipher, the malevolent intent behind the friendly facade, and it's driven him to the brink. This isn't just a bad day at the office, this is a complete psychological breakdown. The portal didn't just transport him, it fundamentally broke him. And this is where things get really, really sad, but also incredibly inventive. In a desperate attempt to cope with the unbearable memories, Fiddleford invents the memory gun. Think about that for a second. This man, in the throes of utter psychological torment, still has the scientific genius to invent a device that erases specific memories. It's a testament to his brilliance, even as his sanity is crumbling. He uses it on himself, repeatedly, trying to wipe away the images of Bill, the portal, the unspeakable things he witnessed. He's trying to put Pandora back in the box, but the lid is already off, and he's just frantically trying to forget what he saw. Each zap of the gun takes a piece of him, a piece of his coherence, a piece of his connection to reality. He's essentially performing self-trepanation, but with lasers and a much more targeted approach. It works in a way, but at a terrible cost. He forgets the specifics, but the underlying trauma, the sense of dread, it lingers. It reshapes him into the lovable, but undeniably eccentric, old man McGucket we all know. Eventually, Fiddleford realises he can't stay. He can't be around the portal, around Stamford, knowing what he knows, or rather, what he tried to forget. He leaves the secret lab, abandoning his research, his partner, and his old life. He disappears from Stanford's immediate orbit, probably just wandering off into the woods, a broken man with a brilliant but scrambled mind. He eventually establishes the Society of the Blind Eye. Now, this isn't some grand, organised conspiracy at first. It's probably just Fiddleford, alone, still haunted by fragmented memories, realising that the only way to protect people from the horrors he witnessed is to make them forget. He starts small, probably just erasing the memories of people who stumble upon strange things in Gravity Falls. He's still trying to do good in his own profoundly misguided way. He's trying to create a bubble of ignorance, a protective layer over the town, because he believes that what you don't know can't hurt you, or, more accurately, what you don't remember can't hurt you as much as it hurt him. It's a tragic origin story for a group that, while well-intentioned, ultimately ends up doing more harm than good by keeping the town in the dark. He's trying to save everyone from the fate he suffered by making them forget the very things they might need to remember. It's a paradox, really. So anyway, Fiddleford McGucket, our illustrious future hillbilly, is off inventing things. Probably, I don't know, a self-stirring spoon or something equally groundbreaking. While back in the real world, or at least our world, the 1980s are really kicking into gear. And with them, a new player arrives in Gravity Falls, bringing with him a level of intellectual curiosity, and frankly, a complete lack of self-preservation that would make most cryptid hunters blush. We're talking about Stamford Pines, Stanley's brother, the six-fingered author of the journals, and a man who, if you ask me, had a serious case of too smart for his own good syndrome. He rolled into town, probably in some beat-up sedan overflowing with scientific equipment and a lifetime supply of instant noodles, sometime around 1980. Now, why Gravity Falls, you ask? Well, Stamford, being the kind of guy who probably read every single dusty tome in every library he ever encountered, had stumbled upon some truly ancient, truly bizarre reports about the area. Whispers, legends, cryptic notes in forgotten texts, all pointing to this one specific, unassuming dot on the map in Oregon. He wasn't looking for a vacation, trust me. He was looking for answers, for anomalies, for anything that defied conventional science, and boy did he hit the jackpot. His first order of business, after presumably finding a diner that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead, was to secure a base of operations. He bought a plot of land, a rather sizable one actually, tucked away in the woods, far enough from the main drag to avoid too many prying eyes, but close enough to town for supplies. And on this land, he didn't build a cosy cabin or a research lab in the traditional sense. Oh no. Stanford Pines, in his infinite wisdom, and perhaps a touch of megalomania, decided to construct what he affectionately, or perhaps ironically, called the Shacktron. Now the Shacktron, as we later learn, was essentially a giant walking battle-ready robot designed to defend against, well, everything. It had laser eyes, grappling hooks, a giant stomping foot, the works. It was, in essence, a weaponized research facility. And this, my friends, is the humble origin of the Mystery Shack, the tourist trap we all know and love. It started as a doomsday bunker disguised as a novelty store, which, if you think about it, is peak Gravity Falls. He probably figured if he was going to be studying interdimensional horrors, he might as well have a giant robot to back him up. Sensible, really. Almost immediately, Stanford confirmed his suspicions. Gravity Falls was a hotbed of the utterly inexplicable. He didn't just find some weird stuff, he found all the weird stuff. The town wasn't just a little bit off. It was practically a giant pulsating beacon for paranormal activity. Gnomes, for instance, were a relatively early discovery. Not the garden variety kind, mind you, but the mischievous, hairy, surprisingly strong, and occasionally vomit-inducing variety. He documented their habits, their weaknesses. Apparently, leaf blowers are their kryptonite, which, again, makes perfect sense in this town, and their surprisingly complex social structures. Then there was the Gorblewonka, a mechanical lake monster operating out of the local lake, built by an old man named Old Man McGucket. Yes, that McGucket will get to him, to get attention from his son. Stanford probably spent days tracking it, taking samples and trying to figure out its propulsion system, only to find out it was powered by an outboard motor and a whole lot of loneliness. And let's not forget the multi-bear, a creature with multiple heads, each with its own distinct personality, living in a cave and, as we later discover, enjoying disco music. Stanford, ever the diligent researcher, meticulously recorded every encounter, every strange phenomenon, every whispered legend. He wasn't just observing, he was cataloguing, analysing, and trying to find the underlying patterns in the madness. This brings us to the journals, all three of them. These aren't just glorified diaries, folks. These are comprehensive, encyclopedic guides to the supernatural world of Gravity Falls. He started writing them almost immediately, probably scribbling notes on napkins before upgrading to actual leather-bound tomes. Each creature, every spell, every cryptic symbol, every unsettling discovery, it all went into those journals. He drew detailed illustrations, wrote down warnings, hypothesized about origins, and even included survival tips. These journals became his life's work, a testament to his obsession, and eventually the key to understanding the entire bizarre ecosystem of Gravity Falls. He poured his heart and soul into them, driven by a thirst for knowledge that bordered on the unhealthy. He probably ate, slept, and breathed cryptids, much to the chagrin of anyone who tried to have a normal conversation with him. Now, during this intense period of solitary research, Stanford, being a social creature, albeit a deeply awkward one, eventually sought out some intellectual companionship. And who better to find than another brilliant, albeit equally eccentric, mind? Enter Fiddleford Hadron McGucket, a man whose name sounds like it was pulled directly from a bluegrass song. Fiddleford, as we've established, was a bona fide genius, a West Virginia native with a knack for invention that bordered on magical. He wasn't just good with gears and wires, he understood the fundamental principles of, well, everything. He was probably tinkering with some sort of sentient toaster oven when Stanford first stumbled upon him. Their collaboration was, to put it mildly, a match made in scientific heaven, or perhaps scientific purgatory, depending on how you look at it. Stanford had the theoretical knowledge, The grand vision, the desire to push the boundaries of reality. Fiddleford had the practical brilliance, the engineering prowess, the ability to turn abstract concepts into working machines. They were the perfect team, a scientific dynamic duo, if you will. They worked on countless projects together, probably fueled by copious amounts of coffee and the sheer thrill of discovery. One of their more notable inventions, and one that has significant ramifications later on, was a device to erase memories. Now, why would two brilliant scientists studying the paranormal suddenly decide they need to wipe people's minds? Well, probably because they kept stumbling upon things that were so profoundly disturbing, so utterly terrifying, that the only humane option was to make people forget. Or perhaps they just needed a convenient way to deal with nosy tourists who saw too much. Either way, the memory gun was born, a testament to their ingenuity and, frankly, their casual disregard for ethical boundaries. But their magnum opus, the project that would ultimately lead to so much heartbreak and interdimensional chaos, was the portal. A device designed to punch a hole through the fabric of reality itself, to explore other dimensions, to unlock the secrets of the multiverse. Stanford, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to prove his theories, was convinced that other dimensions existed, teeming with untold wonders and presumably untold horrors. Fiddleford, ever the loyal friend and brilliant engineer, helped him build it. They poured years of their lives into this monstrous machine, a swirling vortex of wires, crystals, and unknown energies. It was a testament to their combined genius, a monument to their ambition. And this, my friends, is where things take a decidedly dark turn. Because while Stanford was busy building his interdimensional gateway, he made a deal with a being he genuinely believed was a muse, a benevolent entity, offering him unparalleled knowledge and insight. He made a deal with Bill Cipher. Now, Bill, as we know, is not benevolent. He's a triangular dream demon with a penchant for chaos, manipulation, and the utter destruction of reality as we know it. Stanford, in his intellectual arrogance, saw Bill as a partner, a source of inspiration, a shortcut to understanding the universe. He genuinely believed Bill was helping him, that he was guiding him towards greater scientific discoveries. But Bill, being Bill, had a different agenda entirely. He systematically manipulated Stanford, subtly twisting his perceptions, feeding him just enough tantalizing information to keep him hooked, all while slowly but surely gaining access to Stanford's mind, his thoughts, his deepest desires. It was a slow, insidious corruption, a parasitic relationship that Stanford, in his intellectual hubris, was completely blind to. Bill whispered sweet nothings of scientific advancement, of unlocking cosmic truths, of achieving a level of understanding no human had ever reached. He convinced Stanford that the portal was not just safe, but absolutely necessary for the advancement of science, for the good of humanity, for the ultimate unraveling of the universe's greatest mysteries. He played Stanford like a fiddle, and Stanford, eager for validation and knowledge, danced to his tune. Finally, after years of tireless work, after countless calculations, after probably a few explosions and near-death experiences, the portal was ready for a test run. Stanford, brimming with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, and Fiddleford, ever the loyal assistant, stood before their creation. They flipped the switches, turned the dials, and with a surge of energy, a flash of light, and a sound that probably rattled the very foundations of the Shacktron, the portal roared to life. It was a success, a terrifying, beautiful, world-breaking success. They had done it. They had opened a door to another dimension, and with that, they had unknowingly unleashed a cascade of events that would forever alter the fate of Gravity Falls, the Pines family, and possibly the entire universe. The count, by the way, of things that will eventually try to destroy the world just went up by one. And trust me, it's not going to be the last. Anyway, Fiddleford, being the genius he is, gets sucked into the portal. Now you'd think, oh, just a quick trip, probably saw some weird stuff, maybe a few glowing octopi. No, he didn't just see weird stuff, he saw the nightmare realm. The honest-to-goodness, actual, literal nightmare realm. This isn't just a spooky dimension, it's a place of pure chaos, where reality is a suggestion and sanity is a luxury. He saw Bill Cipher's domain, the place where Bill wants to bring everything. And what he saw, it fundamentally broke him. We're talking about a man who, moments before, was excitedly fiddling with interdimensional technology, and now he's a quivering mess, babbling about the end of all things. It wasn't just a scare, it was a full-on psychic assault. He witnessed the true, unadulterated horror of what Stamford was inviting into their dimension. And this is where the timeline takes a hard left turn into tragedy. Fiddleford, completely traumatized, becomes absolutely obsessed with preventing the portal's full activation. He saw the potential for a complete, irreversible apocalypse, and he knew, with a certainty that only comes from staring into the abyss, that it had to be stopped. He tried to warn Stamford, to explain the sheer eldritch terror he'd witnessed, the existential threat that Bill Cipher truly represented. But Stamford, bless his brilliant, stubborn heart, completely dismisses Fiddleford's warnings. He thinks his friend is overreacting, that it was just a bad trip, a momentary malfunction, or perhaps just Fiddleford's own anxieties getting the better of him. He's so wrapped up in his own scientific pursuit, so close to what he believes is the greatest discovery of all time, that he can't fathom anything being truly wrong. He's convinced Fiddleford is just scared of the unknown, not that the unknown is actively trying to devour their reality. This, by the way, is the first major red flag that Stamford might not be the best judge of character, or indeed of impending doom. So what does a brilliant, traumatized inventor do when his best friend won't listen and he's haunted by visions of cosmic horror? He invents the memory gun. Yes, the memory gun. Let that sink in for a moment. Instead of, maybe trying to convince Stamford with empirical evidence, or showing him the terrifying sketches he probably made, or just, punching him in the face and running away, Fiddleford's solution is to erase his own traumatic memories of the portal. He builds a device specifically designed to wipe out chunks of his own mind. This is not a healthy coping mechanism, folks. This is the equivalent of seeing a monster. And instead of fighting it or running, you just try to forget you ever saw it. And it works to an extent. He uses it on himself, repeatedly, trying to bury the horrors he witnessed. He tries to forget the nightmare realm, to forget Bill, to forget the portal. And in doing so, he fragments his own mind, a process that will eventually lead him to become the lovable, eccentric, somewhat unhinged old man McGucket we know and love, or at least know, and are occasionally confused by. But Fiddleford doesn't stop there. He sees the suffering of others, the pain that people carry, and he extrapolates his own self-medication into a public service. He establishes the Society of the Blind Eye, a secret organisation dedicated to helping others forget painful memories. It starts with good intentions, I suppose. People have trauma, Fiddleford has a memory gun, problem solved, right? Except it's not just about forgetting truly traumatic events. It becomes a tool for convenience, for erasing minor embarrassments, for wiping out anything that causes even a flicker of discomfort. They become the arbiters of what people remember and what they don't. It's a terrifying concept if you think about it. A society built on willful ignorance, on the deliberate suppression of truth. And the irony, of course, is that Fiddleford himself, the founder, is slowly losing his own mind through repeated self-application of his invention. He's trying to save others from pain by making them forget, while simultaneously destroying his own cognitive functions. It's a tragic, self-fulfilling prophecy of forgetfulness. Meanwhile, Stanford, oblivious to the mental disintegration of his former partner, continues working on the portal. He's growing increasingly isolated and paranoid. The portal, his life's work, is consuming him. He's barely sleeping, barely eating, just pouring all of his energy into this singular, monumental task. The constant whispers from Bill, the subtle manipulations, the promises of infinite knowledge, they're all taking their toll. He's becoming more secretive, more distrustful of everyone around him, because Bill has been whispering in his ear for so long, telling him that everyone else is either too stupid to understand or actively trying to sabotage him. He's convinced he's on the cusp of something revolutionary, something that will change the world forever, and he can't let anyone stand in his way. He's no longer the wide-eyed, ambitious scientist. He's a man possessed, driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge and a growing sense of dread that he can't quite articulate. At some point, in a moment of either profound foresight or desperate paranoia, he sends the first journal to his brother, Stanley, for safekeeping. This is a crucial detail. He trusts Stanley, despite all their past differences, with his most dangerous secret. He knows deep down that these journals contain information that could be incredibly destructive if it fell into the wrong hands. He probably didn't even tell Stanley what it was, just that it was important, that it needed to be hidden, and that it was for his eyes only. This act, sending the journal away, suggests that even then, a part of Stanford knew he was playing with fire, and he wanted a contingency, a backup plan, a way to preserve his research even if something went horribly, irrevocably wrong. It's a fleeting moment of lucidity in a rapidly descending spiral. Then, the moment of truth arrives. Stanford finally realizes Bill's true intentions. It's not just about sharing knowledge anymore. It's about destruction. It's about unleashing the nightmare realm. It's about Weird-mageddon. He sees through the charming facade, the playful demeanor, and understands the sheer, unadulterated malevolence of Bill Cipher. This isn't a friendly interdimensional entity. This is a cosmic predator, and Stanford has been its unwitting pawn. The realization must have hit him like a physical blow. All his work, all his ambition, all his sacrifices have been for naught, or worse, have been in service of a being that wants to obliterate everything he holds dear. He sees the portal not as a gateway to knowledge, but as a gaping maw to oblivion. In a desperate attempt to rectify his colossal mistake, he tries to shut down the portal. He scrambles, he fights, he pulls levers, he cuts wires, anything to stop the inevitable. But it's too late. The portal is unstable, on the verge of full activation, and Bill has too much influence. The forces he's unleashed are beyond his control. He's trapped in his own creation, a prisoner of his own ambition. As the portal roars to life, threatening to tear apart the fabric of reality, he scribbles a frantic warning in the third journal. He details everything he knows about Bill Cipher, his true nature, his plans, the dangers of the portal, and how to stop him. This isn't just a scientific log anymore. It's a desperate plea, a final warning to anyone who might find it. He knows he's doomed, that he's made a catastrophic error, and his only hope is that someone, anyone, will find his journals and prevent the end of the world. And then, in a final act of defiance and desperation, he hides the journals around Gravity Falls to prevent Bill from finding them. He knows Bill wants them, wants the knowledge within, wants to consolidate his power. So Stanford scatters them, hoping that by dividing them, he can protect them, and by extension, protect the world. He hides them in places only he would know, places that are difficult to find, places that are protected by his own magical wards and traps. It's a last-ditch effort, a Hail Mary pass against a cosmic entity. He sacrifices himself, willingly or unwillingly, to the portal, hoping that his disappearance and the scattering of his knowledge will buy humanity enough time to fight back. And that, my friends, is how we get to the summer of our beloved Pines twins. So we've got a genius who accidentally opened a door to hell, a best friend who literally erased his own mind to cope, a secret society of memory wipers, and 3 incredibly dangerous journals scattered across a small, weird town. What could possibly go wrong? Next time we'll delve into the events leading up to the arrival of Dipper and Mabel, the strange inhabitants of Gravity Falls, and the secrets that lie hidden beneath its surface. We'll explore the history of the town, the origins of some of its most peculiar residents, and how all these disparate threads begin to weave together into the tapestry of chaos we know and love. We'll also finally get to the arrival of the twins themselves, and how their innocent summer vacation quickly devolves into a desperate fight for the fate of reality. What exactly was Bill's endgame with Stanford beyond just opening the portal? How did Bill manage to communicate with Stanford for so long without being detected by other magical entities? And what happened to the original inhabitants of the shack before Stan took over? For our next deep dive, we could explore the convoluted timelines of Kingdom Hearts, the cosmic horror of Warhammer 40,000, or perhaps the surprisingly intricate lore of SpongeBob SquarePants. So, we've established that Gravity Falls is just this magnet for cosmic weirdness, right? Like the universe decided to dump its entire junk drawer of anomalies right here in the Pacific Northwest, which naturally attracts people who are, shall we say, interested in cosmic weirdness. And that brings us finally to 1982. This is when Stanford Pines, our intrepid 6-fingered crypto gamist, rolls into town. Now, Stanford wasn't just some random tourist looking for a Bigfoot selfie. He was a bona fide genius, a paranormal investigator with a doctorate in things that go bump in the interdimensional night. He'd been drawn to Gravity Falls by the sheer impossibility of its gravitational anomalies, the sheer volume of its supernatural phenomena. He wasn't just observing, though. He was there to catalogue, to understand, to basically write the definitive encyclopedia of weirdness for a world that largely pretended it didn't exist. And he wasn't wasting any time. Almost immediately, he sets up shop, dedicating his entire life to unravelling the town's mysteries. His primary goal, the big enchilada, was to figure out why Gravity Falls was such a hotspot. What was the source of all this concentrated oddity? He theorised, quite correctly as it turns out, that there was some kind of interdimensional rift, a tear in the fabric of reality lurking beneath the town. And what do you do when you theorise about interdimensional rifts? You build a portal, obviously, in your basement, no less. Because where else would you house a device capable of tearing holes in reality? The man had priorities, I guess. This wasn't some weekend DIY project, mind you. This was a massive, complex piece of machinery, a true marvel of engineering, even if it was fueled by pure, unadulterated hubris. He was pouring every ounce of his intellect, every waking moment, into constructing this thing. He believed that by opening a gateway to these other dimensions, he could finally understand the source of Gravity Falls' strangeness. He was so close, he could practically taste the trans-dimensional dust. But, as often happens when you're messing with forces beyond mortal comprehension, things started to get a little off. Stanford, being a meticulous researcher, was also keeping a detailed record of his findings, his theories, his experiments. These would eventually become the famous journals, but at this early stage, they were just his notes. And in those notes, he started to discover warnings, not from external sources, not from some ancient prophecy etched into a cave wall, but from his own observations. The portal, even in its incomplete state, was exhibiting strange effects. Fluctuations in reality, whispers from beyond, the kind of stuff that makes you reevaluate your life choices. He realised, with a growing sense of unease that this wasn't just a scientific instrument. It was a gateway to something potentially catastrophic. He was trying to open a door, but he had no idea what was on the other side, or if he'd even be able to close it once it was open. The sheer power required, the unknown variables, the subtle distortions he was already observing, all screamed danger. He wasn't just building a machine, he was building a ticking time bomb, and he needed help. He needed someone equally brilliant, equally dedicated, but perhaps with a slightly more grounded perspective. He needed a partner. And that's where Fiddleford H. McGucket enters the picture. Now McGucket, as we all know, ends up as the resident town eccentric, a rambling old man who talks to inanimate objects and lives in a junkyard. But in 1982, Fiddleford was a certified genius, a prodigy in mechanical engineering and robotics. He was Stanford's old college buddy, a fellow eccentric with a shared passion for invention, and a mind that could rival Stanford's own. Stanford reached out, explaining his grand project, his cosmic theories, and the inherent dangers. McGucket, ever the adventurous inventor, was intrigued. The idea of building a device that could tear through dimensions, that was the kind of challenge he lived for. So he packed his bags, probably with a few more spare parts than clothes, and headed to Gravity Falls. Together, these two intellectual titans, these two mad scientists in the making, worked tirelessly. Stanford provided the theoretical framework, the understanding of the anomalies, the overarching vision. McGucket brought the practical expertise, the mechanical prowess, the ability to translate Stanford's wild ideas into tangible, functioning machinery. They were a perfect match, a scientific dream team. The portal, which had been a formidable undertaking for Stanford alone, now progressed at an astonishing rate. They fine-tuned the mechanisms, calibrated the energy output, and prepared for the moment of truth. And then it happened. They activated the interdimensional portal. The humming, the crackling, the sheer raw energy of it must have been immense. A shimmering, swirling vortex opened, a window into another reality. But what they saw, what McGucket specifically witnessed, was not the grand scientific marvel they had envisioned. It was the nightmare realm, a chaotic, terrifying dimension, home to unimaginable horrors, a place where reality itself was a suggestion, not a rule. We'll get to the full horror of the nightmare realm later, trust me, but suffice it to say it was not a pleasant place to visit. McGucket, a brilliant man, but perhaps not as psychologically prepared for cosmic horror as Stanford, was absolutely traumatized. He saw things that no human mind was meant to comprehend, things that drove him to the brink of madness. He immediately understood the immense danger the portal represented. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was an existential threat. He quit on the spot. He couldn't be a part of something that could unleash such terror upon their world. He was done. But McGucket didn't just quit and go home. The experience had fundamentally broken something in him. He knew what he had seen, and he knew that others, if they were to stumble upon this knowledge, would be equally, if not more, susceptible to its corrupting influence. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen, but he could try to forget it. And he could help others forget too. This was the genesis of the Society of the Blind Eye, a secret organization dedicated to erasing the memories of anyone who witnessed the supernatural oddities of Gravity Falls. McGucket, in his trauma, believed that ignorance was bliss, that forgetting was the only way to protect humanity from the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil. He invented the memory gun, a device capable of wiping specific memories, or even entire chunks of a person's past. And here's where it gets truly tragic. McGucket, in his desperation to forget the portal and the nightmare realm, began to use the memory gun on himself. Repeatedly. He wasn't just wiping the memory of the portal. He was wiping memories of his family, his friends, his own identity, Each zap chipped away at his intellect, at his sanity, transforming him from a brilliant inventor into the lovable but undeniably unhinged old man we know. The running tally of his lost memories, the sheer volume of his self-inflicted amnesia, is genuinely heartbreaking. He became a living testament to the dangers of dabbling in forces beyond human comprehension, a warning sign that Stanford, unfortunately, failed to heed, because Stanford, ever the stubborn intellectual, pressed on. McGuckett's departure, his horrified warnings, the clear evidence of the portal's destructive potential, none of it deterred him. He was convinced that he could control it, that he could master it. He continued working on the portal alone, becoming increasingly isolated, increasingly paranoid. The constant exposure to the portal's energies, the whispers from the other side, the sheer weight of his secret, all started to take their toll. He began to distrust everyone, even his own family. He saw threats where there were none, conspiracies in every shadow. His grand scientific endeavour was slowly consuming him, twisting his brilliant mind into something fearful and suspicious. It was during this period of intense isolation and paranoia that Stanford penned the 3 journals. These weren't just scientific notes anymore. They were a desperate attempt to document everything he had learned, every anomaly, every creature, every theory, and most importantly, every warning about the portal's dangers. He poured his knowledge, his fears, and his growing sense of impending doom into these books. He knew deep down that he might not be able to stop what he'd started. He knew that if the portal were ever fully activated, if it were ever to fall into the wrong hands, the consequences would be catastrophic. The journals were his last line of defense, his final plea to anyone who might stumble upon them to understand the gravity of the situation. He coded them, he hid them, he did everything he could to ensure that only the right person, a person capable of understanding and heeding his warnings, would find them. The irony, of course, is that he was simultaneously trying to disable the very portal he was warning everyone about. He recognized the immense threat it posed, the sheer destructive potential it held. But by this point, the portal had become a beast of its own making. It wasn't just a machine anymore, it was a conduit, a siphon for interdimensional energy. Disabling it wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. He struggled with its complex mechanisms, the interwoven technologies, the sheer power that coursed through its circuits. It was fighting back in a way, resisting his attempts to shut it down. The portal, designed to open a window, was now threatening to tear down the entire wall, which, makes sense. You build a universe-hopping device. You probably want to tell your brother, the one guy who actually understands you, about it. So Stanford, bless his heart, sends a message. He reaches out to Stanley, who at this point is still wandering the country, running various scams, probably trying to sell novelty teeth or something equally ridiculous out of the back of a beat-up car. Stanley naturally gets this message and, for a glorious, fleeting moment, thinks, "Oh hey, my brother wants to make amends. He finally sees the light. He misses me. He wants to be a family again," which, honestly, is just heartbreakingly optimistic, given their history. He packs up whatever illicit wares he's currently peddling and makes the trek to Gravity Falls, probably with a hopeful little bounce in his step. He arrives, probably expecting a heartfelt reunion, maybe a hug, a shared laugh over old times, perhaps even an apology for the whole expulsion from college thing. What he gets instead is Stanford, looking wild-eyed and dishevelled, hair probably even more unkempt than usual, practically vibrating with manic energy, and immediately, without so much as a "Hello, how have you been?" Stanford shoves the 3 journals into his hands. Now this is where it gets truly wild. Stanford's big reveal, his grand plan, isn't to reconcile. It's not to catch up. It's to tell Stanley, his estranged twin, that he needs him to take these incredibly dangerous, reality-bending books and hide them. Just, squirrel them away somewhere safe. Because Stanford, in his infinite wisdom, has decided that the portal, the thing he's been working on for years, the culmination of his life's work, is too dangerous. He's had a change of heart, a moment of acute, albeit delayed, self-preservation. He's realised that Bill Cipher, the triangular dream demon we briefly mentioned, is not just a quirky interdimensional buddy, but a genuinely malevolent entity with designs on universal conquest. And the portal, it turns out, is the key to Bill's grand entrance. So, Stanford's brilliant solution is, hey brother, remember how I basically disowned you? Well, I need you to perform this incredibly important, life-threatening task for me. Just hide these books, don't ask questions, and definitely don't open the portal. Stanley, understandably, is not thrilled. He's just travelled all that way, probably spent his last dime on gas, only to be strong-armed into becoming a glorified librarian for his brother's apocalyptic research. The argument, as you can imagine, escalates quickly. It's not just about the journals anymore. It's about decades of resentment, of feeling like the lesser twin, of being constantly overshadowed and dismissed. Stanley, probably with a mix of genuine hurt and righteous anger, starts yelling. He's probably saying things like, "After all this time, this is why you called me? To clean up your mess?" And Stanford, being Stanford, probably retorts with some variation of, "You wouldn't understand, Stanley. This is important science." The argument, which is now a full-blown shouting match, takes them right into the portal's chamber. The portal, by the way, is still humming, still radiating that eerie, otherworldly glow, a constant reminder of the danger they're discussing. Stanley, in his frustration, probably makes a move to grab the journals back, perhaps to throw them into the portal himself, or just to make a point. Stanford, ever protective of his research, tries to stop him. There's a struggle, a desperate, fumbling fight over the powerful tomes. And in the heat of the moment, amidst the flashing lights and the hum of the machine, Stanley, in a desperate attempt to retrieve the journals, accidentally shoves Stanford. Now this is crucial. It's an accident. Stanley doesn't intend to push his brother into the interdimensional gateway. He's just trying to get the books, to make Stanford listen, to finally have his feelings acknowledged. But the momentum, the force of the push, combined with Stanford's own precarious position near the edge of the platform, sends him tumbling. He falls, not into a bottomless pit, but into the portal itself. And just like that, with a flash of light and a sickening pop, he's gone, vanished, stranded in some unknown dimension, probably screaming. The portal, having fulfilled its purpose of transporting its creator, immediately deactivates. The hum dies down, the lights flicker and die, and the chamber is plunged into a sudden terrifying silence, broken only by Stanley's horrified gasp. He's standing there, alone, holding the journals, staring at the now inert machine, the gaping maw that just swallowed his brother. The realization hits him like a freight train. Stanford is gone, and he, Stanley, is responsible. Panic sets in. He immediately tries to reactivate the portal. He's probably fumbling with the controls, pressing buttons, pulling levers, desperately trying to bring his brother back. But it's no use. The portal, as designed, requires all three journals to function. And while Stanley now possesses them, he doesn't know the sequence, the specific incantations, the precise calculations needed to bring it back online. He tries, he truly does, for what feels like an eternity, but it's a futile effort. Stanford is gone, and Stanley is stuck with the consequences. So, what does he do? Well, he's in Gravity Falls, Stanford's house is there, and the portal is now a giant, inert monument to his screw-up. He can't just leave, he can't explain what happened. Who would believe him? My twin brother, the eccentric genius, got sucked into another dimension, because I pushed him during an argument about magic books. Yeah, that'll go over well. So Stanley does the only thing he can think of, the thing he's always been good at. He becomes someone else. He takes on Stanford's identity. He puts on Stanford's glasses, probably a little too big for his face, and he starts living in Stanford's house. This is a massive undertaking, by the way. Stanford is a renowned scientist, a respected academic. Stanley's a con man with a criminal record, but he's also a survivor, and he's surprisingly good at imitation. He starts operating the Mystery Shack, not as a genuine tourist trap, but as a front. A way to make enough money to survive, to keep up appearances, and most importantly, to obscure the real secret lurking beneath the house. He has to learn to mimic Stanford's mannerisms, his speech patterns, to fool anyone who might come looking for the real Stanford. It's a constant performance, a charade that will last for decades. The journals, the very things that cause this whole mess, become Stanley's most dangerous possessions. He knows their power. He's seen firsthand what they can do. He also knows they're the key to bringing Stanford back. But he also fears them. He fears Bill Cipher, whose warning Stanford had finally heeded. He fears the portal itself. So he hides them. He hides them meticulously in various locations around the shack, making sure no one, especially not himself, can easily access them and accidentally reactivate the portal. He knows he needs them, but he also knows the immense danger they represent. It's a constant internal battle, a tightrope walk between hope and fear. And so, for the next 30 years, Stanley lives a double life. By day, he's Grunkle Stan, the lovable, grumpy, money-grubbing proprietor of the Mystery Shack, fleecing tourists with fake attractions and bad puns. But by night, and in the quiet moments when no one is looking, he's Stanley Pines, the guilt-ridden brother, obsessed with one singular goal: reactivating the portal and bringing Stanford home. He spends those 3 decades poring over Stanford's notes, trying to decipher the complex equations, the arcane symbols, the forgotten languages that hold the key to interdimensional travel. He's probably trying all sorts of wild experiments in the basement, blowing up fuses, causing minor tremors, all in a desperate, lonely attempt to undo his mistake. He's essentially living a lie, all for the sake of a brother he accidentally banished to another dimension. It's a level of dedication, a level of self-sacrifice that's almost unfathomable for a character who, on the surface, appears to be entirely self-serving. He's not just trying to bring Stanford back, he's trying to absolve himself, to make amends for the biggest mistake of his life. And that, my friends, is a powerful motivator. The portal, the journals, the entire town of Gravity Falls, they all become props in his long, drawn-out play of redemption. He's playing the long game, a game that will eventually bring 2 unsuspecting twins, named Dipper and Mabel, right into his orbit, and right into the heart of Gravity Falls' strangest secrets. We'll get to that, trust me. So after Stanford gets himself yeeted into another dimension, we're left with Stanley, who, let's be real, has had a pretty rough go of it. I mean, he just got his life back, kinda. And then his brother, who he just reconnected with after 10 years of silence, immediately vanishes into a glowing triangle hole in the wall. You'd think this would be the point, where Stanley just, I don't know, gives up, goes back to being a con artist on the road, maybe tries to sell some more Stan-Co products that are definitely not just stolen goods repackaged. But no, this is Stanley Pines we're talking about. The man has a stubborn streak wider than the Pacific Ocean. Instead, in 1982, right after the portal incident, Stanley does something genuinely unexpected. He doesn't just pack up and leave Gravity Falls. He decides he's going to stick around and, get this, pretend to be his brother. I genuinely have no idea what went through his head in that exact moment. Was it guilt? A sudden surge of brotherly love he hadn't fully processed? Or just the sheer, unadulterated chaos that follows Stanley Pines everywhere he goes? Probably all three, seasoned with a healthy dose of, I just broke it, I guess I should fix it. So, Stanley, the lifelong grifter, the man who couldn't hold down a legitimate job for more than 5 minutes without either getting fired or starting a pyramid scheme, decides to become Stanford Pines, the brilliant, eccentric scientist. This is a man who, until very recently, was living out of his car, selling fake novelty items. And now he's supposed to embody a six-fingered genius who built a trans-dimensional portal. The sheer audacity of it is almost admirable. Almost. He adopts the identity of Stanford Pines and, crucially, starts using his brother's name and research. We know he immediately gets his hands on Journal 1, which Stanford had conveniently left behind. He needs it, obviously, to understand the portal, to figure out how to bring his brother back, but he also needs it to be Stanford, to maintain the illusion. Because let's be honest, Stanley doesn't know a proton from a potato. He needs the notes, the diagrams, the warnings, just to sound remotely convincing. And this is where the Mystery Shack comes in. Stanley needs money. He needs a cover story. And he needs a place to live that's, attached to a giant, unstable, interdimensional portal. So, he transforms the dilapidated research facility into a tourist trap. The Mystery Shack. It's a stroke of genius, really, or desperation, or both. He starts exploiting the town's weirdness for profit, which, let's be honest, is peak Stanley. He's not interested in understanding the gnomes or the multi-bears or the gribblies. He's interested in charging gullible tourists $5 to look at a Sasquatch scalp that's clearly just a matted rug. He's running this whole operation day in and day out for 30 years. 30 years of faking it. 30 years of trying to reactivate that portal. Think about that. He's living under a false identity, constantly trying to fix a machine he barely understands, all while selling overpriced trinkets and convincing people a jackalope is a real thing. It's a full-time job for a man who famously hates full-time jobs. The dedication, however misplaced, is kind of staggering. He maintains the facade of being Stanford, keeping the truth from everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. The townsfolk, the tourists, even the government agents who occasionally pop up, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. In Gravity Falls, Stanley has to be constantly on guard, constantly performing. It's a masterclass in long-form con artistry, except the mark is the entire world, and the payout isn't money, it's his brother's return. He's using the journals, specifically Journal 1, to understand the portal's mechanics and attempt to reactivate it. And this is where it gets tricky because Stanley's not a scientist. He's a hands-on, trial-and-error kind of guy. He's probably just throwing switches and hoping for the best, occasionally consulting the journal for something that looks like an instruction. I imagine a lot of sparks, a lot of smoke, and a lot of frustrated yelling. He's probably thinking, "Stanford, you brilliant weirdo, why couldn't you have just written this in plain English?" Throughout these 30 years, Stanley frequently encounters and dismisses the strange creatures and phenomena of Gravity Falls. He doesn't care about the scientific implications of a living gremlin or the existential dread of a hide-behind. To him, they're just opportunities for profit. Oh, a creature that makes you question your sanity. Perfect. I'll charge $10 for a blurry photo of it. He's not interested in scientific study. He's interested in the bottom line, which, again, is classic Stanley. He sees a monster. He sees a $sign. This whole charade helps him develop a reputation as a con artist and an eccentric old man among the townsfolk. And this is actually a brilliant, albeit accidental, deflection. Nobody in Gravity Falls would ever suspect this goofy, money-grubbing old man of harbouring a secret lab and trying to open a portal to another dimension. They just think he's, well, Stan, a bit weird, a bit shady, but ultimately harmless in his pursuit of a quick buck. This helps deflect suspicion from his true purpose, which is, of course, to bring Stanford back. He's constantly tinkering, constantly trying to get the portal to hum back to life. He's probably spent countless nights in that secret lab, surrounded by his brother's notes, trying to decipher them, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible science. It must have been incredibly isolating, incredibly frustrating. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle that your genius brother created, a puzzle you barely understand the pieces of, for 3 decades. And all the while, you have to keep up this facade of being a bumbling tourist trap owner. The mental gymnastics alone would be exhausting. And the town of Gravity Falls itself, with all its inherent weirdness, just provides the perfect backdrop for his deception. Who's going to question the weird old man in the weird old shack in the weirdest town in America? It all just blends in. It's the perfect camouflage. He's hiding in plain sight, using the very absurdity of the town to his advantage. It's almost poetic in a twisted Stanley Pines kind of way. He's a master of misdirection, and Gravity Falls is his ultimate stage. We'll get to how well that works out for him, trust me. He needed help keeping up appearances because running a tourist trap, even a profoundly fake one, requires warm bodies to stuff it. So at some point, he brings on Sus Ramirez, a handyman whose loyalty is frankly baffling, given Stanley's general gruffness and penchant for, well, being Stanley. Sus, bless his cotton socks, just kind of sticks it. He's like that stray cat that just decides your porch is home, except this cat can fix a leaky faucet and occasionally offers profound, albeit slightly off-kilter, life advice. Stanley probably just saw a warm body who wouldn't ask too many questions and who could handle a plunger, but Sus, being Sus, became an actual fixture, a permanent, cheerfully oblivious fixture in the Mystery Shack's increasingly bizarre ecosystem. Then a bit later, because you can't have a gift shop without someone to stand behind the counter and look vaguely bored, he hires Wendy Corduroy. Now, Wendy is a whole different flavour of employee. She's laid back, she's reliable, and crucially, she doesn't seem to care that her boss is a walking, talking, ethical grey area. Stanley probably appreciated her chill demeanour, probably saw someone who could handle the occasional weirdness that emanated from the shack, because let's be real, even before the twins showed up, the Mystery Shack was a weirdness magnet. He needed someone who wouldn't bat an eye when a gnome tried to steal a garden hose, or when the taxidermied jackalope suddenly developed a twitch. Wendy, with her almost supernatural ability to remain unfazed, was perfect. She's the kind of person who, if a monster walked in, would probably just ask if it had cash or card. But while Stanley was busy assembling his motley crew of unwitting accomplices, his real work, the actual reason he was in Gravity Falls, was happening deep beneath the shack. For decades, he was toiling away in that hidden basement, trying to repair and power the portal. Imagine the sheer, mind-numbing repetition of that task. Day in, day out, trying to reverse engineer alien technology, with a toolbox probably consisting of a hammer, some duct tape, and a prayer. He's got Stanford's journals, sure, but those things are basically written in a combination of ancient runes and a madman's fever dream. It's not like they came with an IKEA instruction manual for interdimensional travel. He's just down there, surrounded by strange machinery, probably smelling faintly of ozone and despair, trying to get this thing to hum back to life. And it wasn't a smooth process, not by a long shot. He experienced numerous setbacks, countless failures. I mean, we see glimpses of it in the show, these little flashes of weirdness that the town just kind of shrugs off. Those weren't just random Gravity Falls anomalies, those were Stanley's screw-ups. Every time he flipped a switch and the portal sputtered, it probably sent out some kind of localized energy pulse that made the gnomes glow or caused the town's clocks to run backward for an hour. He's essentially conducting a series of uncontrolled, low-level physics experiments under a tourist trap, and the town is just absorbing the collateral damage like a sponge. It's a testament to Gravity Falls' inherent weirdness that nobody really connected the dots between the sudden appearance of a sentient garden gnome and the grumpy old man muttering about quantum fluctuations in his basement. Throughout all this, Stanley maintained a strict emotional distance. He avoided forming deep personal connections, not because he was a total curmudgeon, though he definitely was, but because he genuinely feared that revealing his true identity, his real purpose, would jeopardize his mission. He couldn't risk anyone finding out he wasn't Stanford, couldn't risk anyone asking too many questions, couldn't risk anyone getting close enough to uncover the truth. Every new face was a potential threat, every friendly gesture a possible crack in his carefully constructed facade. It's a lonely existence, living a lie for 30 years, constantly looking over your shoulder, constantly calculating every interaction. He probably saw every new friendship as a vulnerability, a potential weakness that could be exploited, and he simply couldn't afford that. His brother was out there somewhere, and Stanley was going to get him back, no matter the personal cost. So he continued to play the part of the lovable, albeit shady, grifter. He kept collecting and selling those fake artifacts and souvenirs, solidifying his grifter persona. Every authentic Sasquatch hair, every genuine goblin tooth, every ridiculous piece of junk he pawned off on some unsuspecting tourist. It just reinforced the idea that he was nothing more than a con artist, a harmless eccentric. It was a perfect cover. Who would suspect a man whose primary goal in life seemed to be selling overpriced novelty items, of harbouring a secret, decades-long quest to rescue his dimension-hopping twin brother? It's the ultimate misdirection, a grand illusion built on cheap plastic and gullible tourists. And it worked. For 30 years it worked. Occasionally, though, the sheer weirdness of Gravity Falls, or perhaps his own scientific tinkering, would necessitate more drastic measures. He'd sometimes use his brother's scientific equipment, like the memory gun, for personal gain or to cover up incidents. I mean, imagine the kind of messes you'd have to clean up when you're secretly running an interdimensional portal in your basement. Someone sees something they shouldn't have seen. A minor anomaly gets a little too anomalous, and suddenly Stanley's reaching for the memory gun. Oops, looks like you just had a very vivid dream about a sentient hot dog. Pal, nothing to see here. Or maybe he just used it to win a particularly contentious bingo game. Who knows? The point is, he had access to some seriously powerful, reality-bending tech, and he wasn't above using it for the mundane or the utterly insane when the situation called for it. He's not a scientist. He's a pragmatist. If a ray gun can solve a problem, he's using the ray gun. But through it all, through the decades of solitude, the endless tinkering, the constant fear of exposure, Stanley's primary motivation remained unwavering, reuniting with his brother. Every fake souvenir sold, every lie told, every late night spent in that dusty, sparking basement, it was all for Stanford. This wasn't about money, it wasn't about power, it wasn't even really about personal redemption, not yet. It was about family. It was about a promise made, a bond broken, and a desperate, unwavering hope that he could fix it. All his actions during this incredibly long, incredibly lonely period were driven by that singular, all-consuming goal. He was a man possessed by a promise, a grifter with a heart of gold, and a basement full of interdimensional machinery. He just wanted his brother back, and he would stop at nothing to make that happen. So for 30 years, this is Stanley's life. A quiet, desperate, incredibly weird existence, all leading up to the summer of 2012, when a certain pair of twins would accidentally stumble upon his secret and turn his carefully constructed world completely upside down. And that, my friends, is when things really start to get interesting. So after all that cosmic ballet and interdimensional shenanigans, we finally get to what most people actually think of when they hear Gravity Falls. We're talking summer 2012. This is it, the main event, The reason we're all here, probably. Dipper and Mabel Pines, twin siblings, get shipped off to the sleepy, weird and frankly aggressively unsettling town of Gravity Falls, Oregon. Why? Because their parents, I guess, needed a break. Or maybe they just wanted to outsource their childcare to a man who runs a tourist trap and has a penchant for petty larceny. Either way, they arrive at the Mystery Shack, which is less a shack and more a ramshackle monument to questionable taxidermy and even more questionable business ethics. It's run by their great-uncle, Stanford Pines, or as he prefers to be called, Grunkle Stan. We'll get to the real Stanford later. For now, he's just Stan, a man whose primary life goals seem to involve swindling tourists and watching bad television. Almost immediately, Dipper, being the insatiably curious and slightly paranoid kid he is, stumbles upon something that completely upends his summer plans, and frankly, the entire trajectory of his life. He's out in the woods doing, I don't know, kid stuff, probably looking for cryptids, when he finds a hidden compartment in a tree. And inside that compartment, Journal 3. Now, if you've been following along, you know the journals are kind of a big deal. This one, in particular, is a red leather-bound tome, emblazoned with a gold six-fingered hand, and the number 3. Immediately, your spidey sense should be tingling. 6 fingers, huh? That's specific. And it's not just any old diary. This thing is packed, absolutely crammed, with entries detailing the bizarre, the supernatural, and the downright dangerous creatures and phenomena lurking in and around Gravity Falls. It's got invisible ink, it's got warnings, it's got diagrams of things that should absolutely not exist. It's basically Dipper's personal instruction manual for surviving a town that seems determined to eat him. With Journal 3 in hand, Dipper, bless his cotton socks, decides that instead of, maybe showing it to an adult or burning it with fire, he's going to use it as his personal guide to investigating the town's mysteries. Because what could possibly go wrong when a 12-year-old with a book of forbidden knowledge decides to play amateur paranormal investigator in a town that actively tries to kill its residents? This, naturally, leads to their first major supernatural encounter, and it's a doozy. They run into gnomes. Not the garden variety, slightly creepy lawn ornaments. Oh no, these gnomes are small, dirty, and have a collective consciousness that's, shall we say, a little unhinged. They decide that Mabel, with her boundless optimism and glitter-fueled personality, would make an excellent queen. And by excellent queen, they mean captive bride. This, of course, results in a chaotic, surprisingly intense battle, where Dipper and Mabel have to fight off a giant, monstrous gnome formed from the collective bodies of hundreds of smaller gnomes. It's their first taste of just how truly bonkers Gravity Falls is, and it sets the tone for pretty much everything that follows. They learn very quickly that things are not what they seem, and that even the most innocuous-looking creatures can be incredibly dangerous. During all this, they're also getting acquainted with the other inhabitants of the Mystery Shack. There's Wendy Corduroy, a high schooler who works at the shack. She's effortlessly cool, laid back, and seems perpetually unimpressed by the weirdness of Gravity Falls, which is a feat in itself. Dipper naturally develops a massive, all-consuming crush on her, which becomes a running gag and a source of much adolescent angst throughout the summer. Then there's Zeus Ramirez, the Mystery Shack's handyman. Zeus is a gentle giant, a man-child with a heart of gold, an inexplicable fondness for fixing things, often with disastrous results, and a deep, almost spiritual connection to the internet. He's the kind of guy who can accidentally summon a ghost and then offer it a snack. He quickly becomes a loyal friend and a surprisingly competent, if unconventional, ally in their adventures. The weirdness just keeps escalating because Gravity Falls doesn't do slow burn. Soon after the gnome incident, Dipper and Mabel discover a race of tiny, intelligent, and frankly, incredibly aggressive golf course gnomes. Yes, more gnomes. Because why have one type of murderous gnome when you can have two? These little guys live beneath the local mini golf course, and they are fiercely competitive. They rig the course, they cheat, and they will absolutely try to murder you with miniature golf clubs if you beat them. It's a testament to the town's absurdity that even the leisure activities are life-threatening. Then, in a moment that truly cements the summer as something special, Mabel, in a stroke of pure, unadulterated joy, wins a pig at the mystery fair. His name? Waddles. Waddles is a pig, a very cute pig, and he immediately becomes Mabel's beloved pet, her confidant, and occasionally an unwitting participant in supernatural shenanigans. Waddles is, for Mabel, a constant source of comfort and unadulterated happiness, a grounding force in a summer that's otherwise filled with existential dread and monster fighting. He's also, arguably, the most normal thing to happen to her all summer, which, given that he's a pet pig, says a lot. Dipper, meanwhile, is still trying to prove himself. He's constantly feeling overshadowed by Mabel's easy charm and general fearlessness, and he's desperate to be seen as strong, brave, and manly. This leads him to an encounter with a multi-bear in the forest. A multi-bear, as the name suggests, is a bear with multiple heads. Like a lot of heads, each head sings a different part of a barbershop quartet. It's exactly as weird as it sounds. Dipper, in a misguided attempt to impress Wendy, because of course, tries to hunt the multi-bear, or at least prove his bravery by facing it. It's a classic Dipper move, overthinking, overanalyzing, and ultimately getting into a situation way over his head. He eventually learns that true masculinity isn't about fighting monsters, but about being true to himself, which is a surprisingly poignant lesson from a multi-headed singing bear. The timeline really starts to get tangled when Dipper and Mabel stumble upon a time-travelling golf cart. Yes, a golf cart. Because why not? It's operated by a character named Blendin Blandin, a perpetually confused and slightly incompetent time traveller from the future. Naturally, Dipper and Mabel, being children with access to a time machine, proceed to use it to mess with the past, mostly to win prizes at the fair and fix minor inconveniences. This, of course, inadvertently alters local history in subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways. They learn that time travel is messy, complicated, and probably best left to the professionals, especially when those professionals are barely competent themselves. This particular adventure also introduces the concept of time anomalies and the existence of a larger, more complex temporal bureaucracy, which just adds another layer to the already dense law of gravity falls. And we'll get back to Blendin. We'll get back to Blendin. As the summer progresses, Dipper and Mabel continue to encounter various creatures and unravel more of Gravity Falls' secrets. They face off against shapeshifters, ghosts, sentient video game characters, and a host of other bizarre entities. They learn about the town's history, its hidden magical properties, and the pervasive sense of dread that seems to cling to everything. But one of the most significant discoveries they make during this period, and one that has profound implications for the entire series, is the existence of the Society of the Blind Eye. The Society of the Blind Eye is a secret society, as the name implies, dedicated to erasing painful or inconvenient memories. They use a device that literally wipes people's minds, making them forget traumatic events, supernatural encounters, or anything that might disrupt the town's fragile sense of normalcy. This is a huge revelation because it explains why so many of the town's residents seem oblivious to the constant parade of monsters and magic. They're not just naive, they've literally had their memories wiped. This society is run by a man named Blind Ivan, who ironically has had his own memory wiped so many times, he doesn't even remember why he's wiping other people's memories. It's a beautifully tragic and deeply unsettling concept that adds a layer of conspiracy and manipulation to the town's already dark underbelly. It also, crucially, ties into the larger mystery of the journals and the original author. And speaking of the journals and the original author, this period is also when Dipper and Mabel finally start to put the pieces together about Grunkle Stan. They learn that the journals, specifically Journal 1, Journal 2, and Journal 3, were written by a single, brilliant, but ultimately doomed individual, and they start to suspect that Stan knows more than he's letting on. Much, much more. The clues are subtle at first. Stan's suspiciously accurate knowledge of certain creatures, his clandestine activities late at night, the fact that he seems to have a secret basement beneath the mystery shack. But the biggest reveal, the one that shatters their perception of their great uncle, is when they discover that the Grunkle Stan they know isn't actually Stanford Pines. He's Stanley Pines, Stanford's twin brother. This is a massive, universe-altering revelation. All this time, the man they thought was their great uncle, the author of the journals, was actually his twin brother, who had been impersonating him for decades. Stanley had been working tirelessly for years to reactivate a portal, a mysterious device that he believed would bring his brother, the real Stanford, back from another dimension. This twist completely recontextualizes everything they thought they knew about Grunkle Stan. His gruff exterior, his secretive nature, his obsession with the mystery shack, it all suddenly makes sense. He wasn't just a con artist, he was a man on a mission, driven by a desperate love for his brother. And this, my friends, is where things really start to get wild. The stage is now set for the grand, overarching conflict of the entire series. We've gone from gnomes wanting a queen to interdimensional portals and decades-long impersonations. And we're still only halfway through the summer. The absurdity, as you can probably tell, is only going to continue to escalate. And trust me, it does. Oh boy, does it ever. So the big reveal happens, right? Stanley, the guy they've known as Grunkle Stan, finally, after years of elaborate deception, drops the bombshell. He's not Stan. Not the real Stan, anyway. He's Stanley, and the actual Stanford Pines, the brilliant six-fingered author of the journals, has been trapped in another dimension for decades. Stanley, bless his conniving heart, has been secretly, painstakingly rebuilding this impossible, interdimensional portal beneath the mystery shack, a portal designed by his brother to bring him back. And in the summer of 2012, that portal finally flickers to life, spitting out Stanford, looking a bit worse for wear, but undeniably alive. This is, I gotta say, a pretty major moment, not just for the Pines family, but for the fundamental rules of reality in Gravity Falls. Because up until this point, the weirdness was, contained, manageable. Now, we're talking interdimensional travel and a whole new level of cosmic stakes. Stanford, once he's had a moment to, adjust to being back in his own dimension, after 30 years of whatever he was doing, starts laying out the whole, frankly, insane story. He explains that he came to Gravity Falls years ago, drawn by the town's ridiculously high concentration of supernatural anomalies. He was a brilliant, if slightly arrogant, young scientist, and he saw the town as the ultimate research opportunity. He meticulously documented everything he found, every creature, every spell, every bizarre phenomenon, filling those 3 iconic journals that Dipper and Mabel have been using as their guide. But his research wasn't just academic. He was trying to understand the source of the weirdness, to categorize it, and ultimately to protect the world from its more dangerous aspects. And that's where Bill Cipher comes in. Stanford, in his youthful hubris, became fascinated by Bill, a powerful triangular dream demon who presented himself as a muse, a source of infinite knowledge. Bill promised Stanford answers, insight into the true nature of Gravity Falls, and even offered to help him build his interdimensional portal. Stanford, being a man of science, was initially skeptical, but Bill's charms and the allure of forbidden knowledge proved too strong. He entered into a partnership with Bill, allowing the demon access to his mind, believing he could control the situation. This, as you might imagine, was a catastrophic miscalculation. Bill, being a literal demon from another dimension, had his own agenda, and it was far more sinister than simply helping a human scientist. He wanted to cross over into Stanford's dimension, to unleash what he called Weirdmageddon, a chaotic, reality-bending apocalypse. Stanford eventually realized Bill's true intentions, broke off their alliance, and tried to seal away all knowledge of the demon. Hence why he wrote down all those warnings in the journals and tried to hide them. He even built the portal in the first place, hoping to find a way to stop Bill, but it backfired, trapping him instead. So Dipper and Mabel are hit with this double whammy. Not only is their grunkle Stan actually Stanley, but the real Stanford Pines, the legendary author, is alive and well, and he's been battling an interdimensional demon who wants to destroy reality. It's a lot to process for a couple of kids on summer vacation. They learn about the journal's true history, how Stanford wrote them, and how he tried to hide them away, scattering them across Gravity Falls to prevent Bill from ever getting his hands on them. They also get to see Stanford's six-fingered hand, a detail that had always been a mystery in the journals, finally explained as a birth defect, a simple physical trait that became an iconic symbol of the author's uniqueness. It's a moment of profound realization for Dipper, who has idolized the author for so long. The man himself is standing right in front of him, a living legend. Stanford, in his typically academic, slightly detached way, explains that he built the portal not just to study other dimensions, but specifically to bring himself back. See, after he realized Bill's true nature and broke off their partnership, Bill tried to trick him into activating the portal, which would have allowed the demon to cross over. Stanford, in a desperate attempt to prevent this, destroyed the controls, but in the ensuing chaos he was accidentally pushed through the portal, trapping him in various other dimensions for 3 decades. Stanley, driven by guilt and a deep, if often unspoken, brotherly love, spent those 30 years trying to reactivate the portal to bring Stanford home. It's a story of sacrifice and determination, and frankly, a whole lot of lying. The total count of interdimensional entities trying to mess with Gravity Falls is at, 4 now, if you count the gnomes and the various cryptids. The stakes are getting ludicrously high. Now, with Stanford back in the picture, a new dynamic emerges, especially for Dipper. Dipper has always seen himself as the intellectual, the curious one, the one who seeks out knowledge and adventure. He spent the entire summer trying to emulate the author of the journals, trying to be the author. And now, the actual author is here, brilliant, experienced, and with a lifetime of interdimensional exploits under his belt. Dipper starts to feel incredibly inadequate. All his careful research, his clever deductions, his brave encounters with monsters suddenly seem small in comparison to Stanford's vast knowledge and incredible past. Stanford, for his part, sees a lot of himself in Dipper, and he encourages Dipper's scientific curiosity, even offering to take him on as an apprentice. This naturally makes Dipper feel even more conflicted. On one hand, it's his dream come true. On the other, it means potentially leaving Mabel, leaving his old life, and embracing a future that feels both exciting and terrifying. Mabel, meanwhile, is watching all of this unfold with growing alarm. Her summer has been all about fun, friendship, and staying together with Dipper. The idea of Dipper leaving her, of him being drawn away by Stanford's influence, is a terrifying prospect. She sees Stanford as a threat to their bond, a wedge being driven between her and her brother. She's always been the emotional anchor of their duo, and the thought of losing Dipper to a life of interdimensional research, a life she doesn't understand and doesn't want, genuinely scares her. This tension between Dipper's intellectual aspirations and Mabel's desire for connection becomes a central conflict as the summer progresses. It's a classic sibling dilemma, amplified by, interdimensional demons and portals. And just to keep things extra weird, throughout all of this, they keep running into Blendin Blandin. Remember Blendin, the time traveller from the future, who looks like a bald, slightly goofy adult with a weird moustache, and who they initially thought was just a clumsy, unfortunate guy? Well, they encounter him multiple times throughout the summer, often as a direct consequence of their own time-travelling antics. See, in an earlier adventure, Dipper and Mabel themselves used a time travel device, a time tape measure, to try and fix some mistakes, and in doing so, they inadvertently caused a series of events that led to Blendin's own misfortunes. It's a classic closed-loop paradox, where their actions in the past directly influence the future, and vice versa. Blendin, who is usually just trying to do his job for the time anomaly removal crew, ends up getting tangled in their messes, sometimes even getting arrested or having his career jeopardized because of them. It's a running gag that highlights the inherent absurdity of time travel and the unintended consequences of messing with the timeline. The number of times the timeline has been irrevocably altered by these kids is probably in the double digits by now. As the summer draws to a close, and with Stanford back, the Pines family begins to realise the true scope of the danger they're in. Bill Cipher's influence, though initially subtle, is growing stronger. Stanford, with his first-hand knowledge of the demon, recognises the signs. The increasing frequency of anomalies, the strange whispers, the unsettling feeling that pervades the town. He knows that Bill is planning something big, something that will culminate in the dreaded Weird Mageddon. The entire family, including Stanley, who despite his gruff exterior genuinely cares about his brother and his family. Dipper and Mabel begin to prepare for the impending threat. They know they're facing an enemy unlike anything they've ever encountered, an enemy with godlike powers and a thirst for chaos. The carefree summer vacation has officially morphed into a desperate fight for reality itself. It's no longer just about solving mysteries, it's about preventing the apocalypse. So with all this going on, you have to wonder, how did Stanford, a brilliant scientist, fall for Bill's tricks in the first place? What exactly was Stanford doing? For those 30 years he was trapped in other dimensions. Did he find any other beings like Bill out there? And how did the Time Baby, the literal infant ruler of time, not notice all the shenanigans going on in Gravity Falls until it was almost too late? For the next deep dive, we could explore the cosmic horrors of Courage the Cowardly Dog, the convoluted history of Adventure Time, or maybe even the surprisingly dense lore of My Little Pony. Friendship is magic. So, summer 2012, the end of it really. We've been building to this, all those little cracks in reality, all those whispers of a triangle demon, all those times Ford probably should have just, not poked the cosmic bear. Well, the bear is awake, it's angry, and it brought friends. Bill Cipher, that triangular menace we've been tracking since, the cave paintings? He finally gets his shot, and he does not waste it. See, remember that interdimensional rift? The one Ford built, then tried to hide, then Stan accidentally activated, then Dipper almost broke? Yeah, that one. It turns out that rift wasn't just a portal to another dimension. It was effectively a cosmic pressure valve. And Bill, being Bill, figured out how to shatter it. He doesn't just open a door, he breaks the wall. And when that wall shatters, all the weirdness, all the pure, unfiltered, nonsensical chaos of the nightmare realm comes pouring into Gravity Falls. This isn't just a local anomaly anymore. This is a full-blown, reality-bending apocalypse, what the locals quite accurately dub Weird Mageddon. The immediate aftermath is, to put it mildly, visually striking. Gravity Falls, a town already prone to the bizarre, is almost instantly transformed into something out of an acid trip gone horribly wrong. The sky turns a sickly, sunset orange, perpetually twilight. Trees twist into impossible shapes, buildings warp and melt like forgotten ice cream, and gravity itself seems to become more of a suggestion than a rule. We see houses floating, roads coiling like serpents, and the very fabric of reality stretching and tearing at the seams. It's less a takeover and more a complete, unhinged redecoration of the universe, courtesy of Bill Cipher's aesthetic choices. He has a very specific vision, apparently, and that vision involves a lot of unsettling geometry and a distinct lack of straight lines. And it's not just the scenery. Bill brings his entourage. The first things we really see are these terrifying, glowing red bat-like creatures with single enormous eyes. They're called eye bats because, well, what else would you call them? They swarm the skies, acting as Bill's primary enforcers and surveillance. They're basically flying cyclopean security cameras that also happen to be capable of turning people to stone. Handy that. Gravity Falls, which previously had a fairly manageable monster-to-human ratio, suddenly finds itself utterly overwhelmed by these things, not to mention a whole host of other nameless, squiggly, unsettling creatures that just sort of manifest from the chaos. It's pure nightmare fuel, and Bill is absolutely reveling in it. His first order of business, after thoroughly redecorating the town, is to establish his base of operations. And because Bill is nothing if not theatrical, he doesn't just squat in the town hall. Oh no, he erects the pyramid. It's a colossal, black, floating pyramid that appears in the exact centre of Gravity Falls, piercing the perpetually orange sky. It's made of some kind of obsidian-like material, covered in glowing blue lines, and it just hovers there, menacingly. Inside, it's a labyrinth of impossible geometry, shifting rooms and glowing energy. It's a statement piece, basically. I'm here, I'm evil, and I like triangles. You know, subtle. And speaking of statements, Bill doesn't come alone. He's got his whole gang. These are the guys we've seen in flashbacks, the ones who are trapped in the nightmare realm with him, just waiting for their parole. There's 8-Ball, a giant green cyclopean monster with 8 billiard balls for eyes. There's Kryptos, a sentient trapezoid with glowing red eyes and a penchant for destruction. There's Xanthar, a massive, multi-eyed, tentacled blob. There's also Pyronica, a demoness made of fire, and Patsifier, a demonic pacifier that's surprisingly menacing. Oh, and the one that always gets me, Hectagon, a geometric demon with a top hat. Because even cosmic horrors need a little formal wear, I guess. These guys are Bill's lieutenants, his inner circle of chaos, and they are unleashed upon Gravity Falls with gleeful abandon. They start terrorizing the townsfolk, turning people into tapestries, playing cosmic games of catch with buildings, and generally just making everyone's lives a living nightmare. It's a real party, if your idea of a party involves existential dread and geometric mutilation. Now, while all this is happening, Dipper and Wendy are doing what any sane person would do, trying to save Mabel. Because if you remember, Mabel, in a fit of understandable but ultimately misguided teenage angst, had given Bill the rift, thinking he would just go away or something, and Bill, being Bill, immediately imprisoned her. But not in a dungeon, oh no. Bill knows Mabel. He knows her weaknesses, her desires, so he creates Mabeland. This is where things get really insidious. Mabeland is a giant, pink, iridescent bubble floating in the middle of the surreal landscape. Inside, it's Mabel's perfect world. Everything is made of glitter and rainbows. There are talking pigs, endless sweaters, bottomless pits of candy, and everyone loves her unconditionally. It's a literal dream world, designed to keep her happy, docile, and completely oblivious to the apocalypse raging outside. Dipper and Wendy, seeing this giant shimmering sphere, naturally assume Mabel is in distress. They break in, expecting a damsel in distress scenario, but for a while, Mabel is genuinely content. She's got her perfect boyfriend, her perfect friends, her perfect life. It's a sugary, saccharine prison. She doesn't have to deal with any of the messy, complicated realities of growing up, or the fact that her brother is literally fighting a cosmic demon. It's a brilliant, cruel move by Bill, because it preys on Mabel's deepest desire for uncomplicated happiness. It takes Dipper, and eventually Mabel herself, realizing the artificiality of it all, that true happiness isn't manufactured and devoid of challenge, to snap her out of it. It's a surprisingly poignant moment amidst all the chaos, a reminder that, even in the apocalypse, personal growth is still on the menu. Meanwhile, outside Mabeland, things are going from bad to worse. Dipper and Wendy eventually reunite with Seuss, who, bless his cotton socks, is still trying to be helpful despite the world ending. And then, in a truly unexpected turn of events, Grunkle Stan shows up. Remember, Stan was last seen getting arrested, then escaping, then kind of just wandering off. But he's back, and he's wearing a tattered suit and a determined look. The family, or at least the core Pines family unit plus Wendy and Seuss, are back together, and they immediately start formulating a plan. Because what else do you do when a triangular demon is turning your town into a Dali painting? You make a plan. Probably a bad one, but a plan nonetheless. While the kids are trying to figure out how to save Mabel and, the universe, Bill is busy securing his most valuable asset, Ford. Remember Ford? The author of the journals, the guy who made the rift in the first place, the one with all the knowledge about the multiverse and how to potentially defeat Bill? Yeah, Bill wants him. Ford, being the brilliant but perpetually unlucky academic that he is, gets captured. Bill imprisons him at the very top of the pyramid, suspended in a glowing cage. Bill doesn't want to kill Ford, not yet. He wants Ford's knowledge. He wants to know how to expand Weirdmageddon beyond Gravity Falls to truly engulf the entire universe in chaos. He wants the formula, the secret sauce, the cosmic cheat codes. Ford, predictably, refuses to cooperate, which leads to some truly unsettling scenes of Bill trying to extract the information from his mind. It's not pleasant. And the townsfolk? Well, they're not having a great time either. Bill's henchmen, those lovely creatures like 8-Ball and Cryptos, are systematically rounding up the residents of Gravity Falls. And they're not just putting them in jail. Oh no. They're turning them into stone. We see Gideon, who, despite his villainous past, is now just another terrified kid. And Pacifica, the formerly snobby rich girl, along with countless other familiar faces, all frozen in petrified agony. They're stacked up like macabre totems, forming a grotesque throne for Bill outside the pyramid. It's a chilling display of power, a constant reminder to anyone who might consider resisting that Bill is not messing around. It's also a surprisingly effective way to get the audience to feel genuine fear for characters we might have previously disliked. Gideon, for all his faults, doesn't deserve to be a lawn ornament. Back in Mabeland, the illusion finally breaks. Dipper, with Wendy's help, manages to convince Mabel that her perfect world is a lie. The candy is fake, the friends are fake, and the happiness is ultimately hollow. It's a tough pill to swallow, but Mabel finally sees the truth. She realizes the gravity of the situation. Pun intended, maybe. The reconciliation between Dipper and Mabel is crucial here. They've been at odds for a while, their sibling bond strained by the pressures of their summer and by Mabel's desperate desire to cling to childhood. But facing a literal apocalypse and the realization that Bill exploited her vulnerabilities brings them back together. They're a team again, and they're going to need to be, because things are about to get even weirder. With Mabel free from her bubble prison, the Pines family, now fully reunited and reconciled, along with their increasingly motley crew of allies, makes a beeline for the one place that seems to offer any semblance of safety or resistance, the Mystery Shack. Suze is there, ever loyal. Wendy, always dependable, is ready for a fight. And in a surprising turn of events, Pacifica, having escaped petrification thanks to her quick thinking, and probably a healthy dose of sheer terror, joins them. Even Gideon, after being freed from his stony prison by some quick thinking, finds himself reluctantly allied with the Pines. The Mystery Shack, once a tourist trap, now becomes the last bastion of humanity, a beacon of hope against the encroaching chaos. It's a strange collection of individuals united only by their shared enemy and their desire to not be turned into furniture. And it's here, amidst the decaying oddities and questionable taxidermy, that they start to plan their final stand. Anyway, with Bill's terrifying new form now unleashed and the town in utter chaos, the gang, surprisingly, doesn't immediately flee. They don't just throw up their hands and say, "Well, this has been fun. Guess we're all going to be tapestries now." Instead, they stumble upon the one thing that might actually give them a fighting chance: the prophecy of the Zodiac. Now, this isn't some ancient parchment they found in a dusty attic, though that would be far too convenient. This is a mural painted by the original town founder, Nathaniel Northwest. Yes, Pacifica's ancestor, because of course it is. Everything is connected in this ridiculously intricate tapestry of weirdness. This mural depicts 10 symbols arranged in a circle, each representing a key player in Gravity Falls. We've got the pine tree for Dipper, the shooting star for Mabel, the question mark for Suze, the ice bag for Wendy, the six-fingered hand for Ford, the fez for Stan, the llama for Pacifica, the glasses for McGucket, because, glasses, the heart for Robbie, a broken one naturally, because he's a brooding teenager, and a stitch for Gideon, the one on his prison uniform, a constant reminder of his villainous past, which is just delightful. The prophecy states quite plainly that if these 10 individuals join hands in the correct order, they can defeat Bill Cipher. Simple enough, right? Except, as with all prophecies, there's always a catch, or in this case, about a dozen catches. The immediate problem is that half of these people are either missing, actively trying to kill each other, or just generally uncooperative. But the glimmer of hope is enough. They realise that their best shot isn't to run and hide, it's to go directly to the source of the problem. The pyramid, Bill's triangular, eye-adorned fortress of pure chaos. And what better way to storm a reality-bending pyramid than in a giant, walking, battle-ready mystery shack? Because, of course, Suze, bless his mechanically inclined heart, along with the other townsfolk who haven't been turned into furniture, sets about transforming the mystery shack. They bolt on armour, they add giant grappling hooks, they install a makeshift cannon that fires, well, whatever they can find. It's a glorious, absurd testament to human ingenuity in the face of literal apocalypse. The shack, now a clanking, groaning, mobile fortress, becomes their vessel for what is essentially a suicide mission. They roll out, or rather, walk out, directly toward the pyramid, which is just sitting there, pulsating with malevolent energy, daring them to try something. The journey is, predictably, not a smooth one. Bill's henchmen, those grotesque eye-bat-like creatures and other assorted nightmare fuel, swarm them. It's a frantic, desperate battle, with Dipper and Mabel coordinating the defence, Wendy firing arrows, Suze driving the whole contraption, and even the townsfolk pitching in, throwing whatever they can at the monstrous hordes. They're outnumbered, outgunned, and frankly, outweirded, but they push through, fueled by a combination of adrenaline, stubbornness, and the sheer audacity of their plan. Eventually, after a surprisingly effective display of vehicular combat involving a wooden shack and interdimensional demons, they reach the base of the pyramid. They breach the defences, which, honestly, are a bit flimsy for a cosmic horror's stronghold. But perhaps Bill was expecting everyone to just give up. Inside they find Ford, trapped in a crystalline prison, but otherwise unharmed. This is where Ford drops the real bombshell, the one that makes everything even more terrifying. He explains that Bill isn't just messing around for kicks. Bill needs Ford's mind. Specifically, he needs the knowledge contained within Ford's incredibly complex six-fingered brain to figure out how to spread weird Mageddon beyond the confines of Gravity Falls. See, there's a natural barrier, a sort of metaphysical force field that contains Bill's chaos within the valley. It's why his influence, while devastating locally, hasn't consumed the entire planet. Ford, being the brilliant, albeit often foolish scientist he is, knows how to dismantle that barrier. And Bill, being Bill, plans to extract that information by any means necessary. This raises the stakes from local apocalypse to universal annihilation, which is just a casual Wednesday for the Pines family at this point. Before they can formulate a new plan, or even properly process the end of all existence part, Bill's cipher himself appears, because of course he does, always with the dramatic entrances. He's furious that they even made it this far, and in the terrifying display of power, he effortlessly captures Dipper and Ford. He holds them both, suspended in the air, threatening to torture them for Ford's knowledge. The situation looks utterly hopeless. Dipper, ever the strategist, tries to appeal to Ford, urging him to use the Zodiac. But Ford, having seen Bill's true power, is convinced it's futile. He's resigned to his fate, believing he's the only one who can stop Bill, even if it means sacrificing himself. This is where Stan, who's been surprisingly quiet throughout this whole ordeal, steps up. And this is where the timeline takes a sharp, unexpected turn into pure, unadulterated heroism. Stan, seeing his brother about to be destroyed, and knowing Ford's stubborn refusal to work with the others on the Zodiac, concocts a plan so audacious, so utterly Stan, that it just might work. He proposes a swap. He offers to pretend to be Ford, to let Bill into his mind, if it means saving his brother and Dipper. Now Bill, for all his cosmic power, has one glaring weakness: his arrogance. He believes he's the smartest being in the multiverse, incapable of being tricked by mere mortals. He's also obsessed with getting Ford's knowledge. So when Stan and Ford quickly, frantically, switch clothes, a truly bizarre visual in the middle of an apocalypse, I must say, Bill falls for it. He sees the six-fingered hand on Stan's Ford clothes, hears the "I'm willing to make a deal" from Stan's mouth, and assumes he's got the right twin. It's a brilliant, desperate ploy, banking entirely on Bill's overconfidence. Bill, thinking he has Ford, makes a deal. He'll spare Dipper and the others if he can enter Ford's mind and extract the secrets to universal domination. Ford, now disguised as Stan, tries to stop it, realizing what his brother is about to do. But it's too late. Stan, with a grim determination, agrees. He knows the cost. He knows what's about to happen. Bill's cipher, with a triumphant cackle, enters Stanley's mind. And this is where the real genius of the plan unfolds. Because Stan, unlike Ford, doesn't have the intricate knowledge of interdimensional barriers. He doesn't have the secrets to spread weird Mageddon. What he does have is a lifetime of memories, a chaotic, messy, wonderful jumble of scams, adventures, and most importantly, love for his family. As Bill enters Stan's mind, he's not met with the complex scientific diagrams he expected. He's met with a lifetime of Stanley Pines. And Stan, with a heartbreaking, selfless act of love, allows Bill to be trapped. He doesn't fight him. He doesn't try to hide anything. He simply lets Bill walk into a mental trap. Meanwhile, outside of Stan's mind, Mabel, who has been holding onto Ford's memory gun, a device that, as we've seen, can erase specific memories or even entire personalities, understands the plan. With tears streaming down her face, knowing the sacrifice her grunkle Stan is making, she activates the memory gun. She aims it at Stan's head, and with a flash of light, she pulls the trigger. The blast from the memory gun does two things simultaneously. It erases Stanley's memories, effectively turning him into a blank slate, a man without a past. But because Bill Cipher is currently inside Stanley's mind, the memory gun also erases Bill Cipher from existence. It's a truly ingenious, brutal, and incredibly sad way to defeat a cosmic entity. Bill, trapped in a mind that is being systematically wiped clean, lets out a final agonizing scream of AXOLOTL. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return, before he is utterly obliterated, reduced to nothing more than a faint, shimmering outline that quickly fades. The instant Bill Cipher is gone, the interdimensional rift, the one that Ford had accidentally opened all those years ago, begins to close. The chaotic, reality-bending energy that had been pouring into Gravity Falls starts to recede. The sky, which had been a psychedelic nightmare of impossible colours and shapes, slowly begins to return to its normal blue. The monstrous inhabitants of Weird Mageddon, those eye bats and floating eyeballs and sentient pieces of furniture, all dissipate, vanishing as if they were never there. The town, which had been twisted and distorted into Bill's personal playground, slowly, painfully, starts to return to normal. Buildings right themselves, people unpetrify, and the general sense of existential dread begins to lift. It's not an instant fix, of course. The town is still a mess, covered in debris and the lingering echoes of chaos. But the immediate threat is gone. The sun shines again. Birds, probably very confused birds, start to sing. The immediate aftermath is bittersweet. They've saved the world, but at a terrible cost. Stan, the man who had always been there for them, the gruff, lovable Grunkle, is now a vacant shell, unable to recognize anyone, unable to remember his own name. It's a devastating blow, a stark reminder that even in victory, there are sacrifices. However, this isn't the end of Stan's story, thankfully. The family, unwilling to accept this as his permanent state, rallies around him. They try everything to bring back his memories, but nothing seems to work. Until, that is, Mabel has an idea. She brings out their scrapbook, filled with all the adventures they've had together in Gravity Falls, all the silly, dangerous, heartwarming moments. She starts flipping through it, showing Stan pictures, telling him stories, and slowly, miraculously, the memories begin to trickle back. It's a slow process, a gradual awakening, but eventually, through the power of shared experiences and the love of his family, Stanley Pines fully returns. He remembers everything, the good, the bad, the incredibly weird. He's still Stan, still gruff, still a scammer at heart, but now with the added weight of having literally saved the world. It's a powerful, emotional ending to an arc that began with two estranged brothers and ended with one sacrificing his mind for the other. So with Bill gone, the rift closed, and Stan's memories restored, Gravity Falls slowly but surely returns to its quaint, mysterious, but ultimately safe self. The summer is drawing to a close, and with it, the twins' time in Gravity Falls. But before they leave, there are a few loose ends, a few final goodbyes, and a lingering question or two about the future of this incredibly strange town. And about that axolotl chant Bill made. We'll get to that, trust me. So, Weird Mageddon ends, right? And it ends with the biggest, most genuinely shocking sacrifice in the entire series, which is saying something because this show is basically a sacrifice convention. Grunkle Stan, in a moment of pure, unadulterated heroism, wipes his own mind to save everyone. Just gone. All those years of being a grifter, a con man, a lovable rogue, erased. And you think, okay, this is it. This is the tragic end for Stanley Pines, the guy who finally did something unequivocally good and paid the ultimate price. But nope, because this is Gravity Falls, and even genuine tragedy has a loophole. Dipper and Mabel, bless their little cartoon hearts, refuse to let that stand. They know their Grunkle Stan. They know the stories, the jokes, the terrible puns, the fact that he probably still owes someone money in every state. So they do what any loving, slightly unhinged family would do. They drag him to the mystery shack and start flipping through his scrapbook. And it works, because apparently the human mind, even one as cluttered and morally ambiguous as Stanley's, is just a big old scrapbook of memories. They show him pictures, tell him stories, remind him of all the bizarre, dangerous, and occasionally heartwarming things they've been through together. And slowly, painstakingly, the memories start to trickle back. It's not an instant download, it's a gradual process. Like a really slow internet connection, trying to load a massive GIF. But by the end of it, Stanley's back. Full Grunkle Stan, complete with the cynicism, the gruff exterior, and the surprisingly squishy interior that he tries so desperately to hide. It's a miracle, honestly, and a testament to the power of family, or maybe just the power of really persistent children. The Pines family, for the first time in what feels like forever, is whole and relatively sane, considering what they just went through. Now, as late summer 2012 rolls around, the inevitable happens. Dipper and Mabel's summer vacation is over. They've saved the world. They've faced down interdimensional demons. They've uncovered family secrets that would make most people question their entire lineage. What do you even tell your parents about that? Yeah, Mom, Dad, we were almost turned into a living throne by a triangular dream demon. But don't worry, Grunkle Stan punched him in the eye. They pack up their bags, their journals, and probably a few souvenirs that are definitely not allowed on commercial flights. It's a bittersweet goodbye, as these things always are. They've grown so much, not just physically, but in terms of their understanding of the world, and more importantly, of themselves. Dipper, the anxious, bookish kid, has found his courage and his voice. Mabel, the relentlessly optimistic, glitter-loving whirlwind, has learned that sometimes even joy needs to be tempered with a little bit of reality. They promise to visit, of course, and you know they will, because Gravity Falls, even without the immediate threat of universal annihilation, has a way of sticking with you. It's like a particularly stubborn piece of gum on your shoe, but, you know, in a good way. And with the twins gone, what's left for the Grunkles? Well, Stanford, the brilliant, slightly socially awkward scientist who accidentally invited an interdimensional being to wreak havoc on reality, has a proposition for Stanley. He suggests they fulfill their childhood dream, voyage around the world, exploring anomalies. Stanley, who just got his memories back and probably just wants to sit on the couch and watch bad TV, surprisingly agrees. It's a chance for them to finally bond as brothers, to make up for those decades of estrangement and resentment. They buy a boat aptly named the Stan-O-War 2, because of course it is, Stanley wouldn't have it any other way, and set sail. And you just know their adventures are going to be absolutely wild. Imagine Stanley trying to haggle with a sea monster, or Ford meticulously documenting a sentient iceberg. The postcards they send back to Dipper and Mabel are filled with tales of cryptids, strange phenomena, and probably a few close calls with international authorities. It's the perfect ending for their arc, a harmonious blend of their individual passions, finally united. Meanwhile, back in the town of Gravity Falls itself, things are slowly, very slowly, returning to a semblance of normal, or as normal as Gravity Falls ever gets, which is to say, not very. The town was literally ripped apart and reassembled by Bill Cipher. Buildings were twisted into impossible shapes. Laws of physics were treated as mere suggestions. So there's a lot of cleanup. But the weirdness, the underlying fundamental strangeness of the town persists. It's like a stain you can't quite get out. You might paint over it, but you know it's still there, lurking. The gnomes are still gnoming. The multi-bears are still multi-bearing, and the bottomless pit is still, well, bottomless. Weird Mageddon was a major event, a cataclysm, but it didn't fundamentally alter the town's weird DNA. If anything, it probably just cranked it up a notch. The residents, having faced down literal apocalypse, are probably a little more jaded, a little more accepting of the bizarre. What's a sentient cloud after you've seen a giant, eyeball-headed monster? One of the most heartwarming outcomes of the whole ordeal is what happens to Fiddleford McGucket. Poor Fiddleford, the town kook, the perpetually bewildered inventor who spent decades in a self-induced amnesia to forget the horrors he witnessed. After his memories are restored, thanks to Dipper and Mabel naturally, he doesn't just go back to being the old Fiddleford, he regains his full sanity, which is a pretty big deal. All that genius, all that intellect that was fractured and buried under layers of trauma is now accessible again, and he puts it to good use. He starts inventing new technologies, things that would probably make even Stanford Pines raise an eyebrow. We're talking about devices that could revolutionize the world, or at least make life in Gravity Falls significantly more convenient, if not less weird. He's no longer just the inventor of the memory gun, he's a brilliant mind finally unleashed, a testament to the idea that even after the darkest times, recovery and progress are possible. And he probably still talks to himself a little, but now it's more like a genius brainstorming session than a symptom of profound mental distress. And then there's Suze. Oh, Suze, the lovable, perpetually optimistic handyman of the Mystery Shack, who always wanted to be more than just the guy who fixes things. After Weird Mageddon, with Grunkle Stan off sailing the world, and Ford off, well, doing whatever Ford does, Suze steps up. He takes over the Mystery Shack as its new owner and manager. It's a natural progression, honestly. He knows the place inside and out, he loves it, and he genuinely cares about the weirdos who frequent it. It's his dream come true, and you can practically hear the collective sigh of relief from the fandom. The shack, under Suze's gentle, enthusiastic guidance, probably becomes even more welcoming, even more bizarre, and certainly still a magnet for all things strange. He probably institutes Employee of the Month awards for the gnomes, and gives free snacks to the tourists who look sufficiently bewildered. It's the perfect continuation of the shack's legacy, a place where the weird is celebrated, and everyone feels like family. Wendy Corduroy, the effortlessly cool axe-wielding teenager, continues her adventurous life. She's always been competent and brave, but her experiences during Weird Mageddon, especially fighting alongside Dipper and Mabel, give her a deeper understanding of the supernatural. She's seen firsthand what lurks beneath the surface of Gravity Falls, and it hasn't scared her away. If anything, it's probably made her even more resilient, even more capable. She's not just a cool teenager anymore. She's a seasoned veteran of interdimensional conflict. You just know she's out there, probably still hanging with her friends, but now with an extra layer of awareness, a quiet confidence that comes from having stared down the end of the world and lived to tell the tale. She probably still works at the shack sometimes, helping Suze, because some things just never change. And what about the villains, or at least the antagonists who aren't triangular demons? Gideon Gleeful, the pint-sized psychic con artist, is released from prison. He's had a lot of time to think in there, probably plotting new schemes, but also, hopefully, doing a little bit of genuine introspection. He attempts to reform, and for the most part he succeeds. He's still got that mischievous twinkle in his eye, and his theatrical flair, but he's trying to be a better person. His mischievous nature occasionally resurfaces, because old habits die hard, especially when you're a natural showman with a penchant for manipulation. But he's not actively trying to destroy the Pines family anymore. He might try to pull a fast one on a tourist or two, but it's more for the thrill of it than out of genuine malice. He's a work in progress, like most of us, just with more glitter and a tiny suit. Then there's Pacifica Northwest, the initially snobbish, wealthy heiress who slowly, begrudgingly became a better person. After Weird Mageddon, her transformation continues. she truly begins to break free from her parents' suffocating influence. It's a long process because those kinds of generational expectations are deeply ingrained, but she starts to show genuine kindness, not just as a performance, but because she actually means it. She's still got her designer clothes and her expensive tastes, but now there's a heart underneath all that cynicism. She might even be seen volunteering or, gasp, being genuinely friendly to someone who isn't rich. It's a testament to the idea that people can change, even if they come from a long line of terrible people. And finally, Robbie Valentino, the brooding, angsty musician who is perpetually stuck in a state of teenage rebellion. He continues his music career, and surprisingly, after Weirdmageddon, he might even find more success. There's nothing like a near apocalypse to inspire some truly angsty yet commercially viable rock anthems. Maybe he writes a song about fighting giant eye bats, or about the existential dread of watching your town turn into a nightmare scape. Whatever it is, his music probably resonates with a wider audience, because who hasn't felt a little bit of that post-apocalyptic angst? He's still Robbie, still probably wearing too much eyeliner, but now he's a Robbie with a slightly larger fan base and perhaps a slightly less perpetually annoyed expression. As for Dipper and Mabel, they're back home, trying to adjust to normal life after a summer that was anything but. But they're not completely cut off from Gravity Falls. They receive postcards from Grunkle Stan and Ford, detailing their adventures around the world. These aren't just generic wish you were here postcards. They're filled with sketches of cryptids, cryptic messages, and tales of daring escapes. It's a way for the twins to stay connected to the weirdness, a reminder that their summer wasn't just a dream. It was real, and the world is still full of mysteries, just waiting to be uncovered. It also keeps the door open, just a crack, for future adventures, for the possibility that they might one day return to Gravity Falls and dive back into the strange and wonderful world they left behind. So the portal in the Mystery Shack, the one that started this whole mess with Ford and then Bill trying to get through, that thing stays closed. Like, permanently. Which honestly is probably for the best. You don't want another interdimensional gateway just chilling in your gift shop, even if it does technically make for a great tourist attraction. The memory of it, though, that lingers, not just for the Pines, but for anyone who was around when Ford was doing his experiments. It's like, you know how everyone in Gravity Falls has seen something weird, but they usually just shrug it off? This was a big weird, harder to ignore. Dipper, meanwhile, is not exactly putting his feet up. He's still knee-deep in anomalies and mysteries. He's applying everything he learned that summer. The journals, the cipher wheel, the fact that sometimes the weirdest explanation is actually the correct one. He's got Ford's journal now, the actual original Journal 3, not the copies, and that thing is a prized possession. He's not just reading it, he's adding to it. He's making his own observations, sketching new creatures, theorizing about the nature of reality. He's basically becoming a mini Ford, but hopefully with better social skills and less of a tendency to get trapped in other dimensions for 30 years. He's probably got a whole new classification system for cryptids that makes Ford's look like a child's crayon drawing. And he's probably still sending Ford letters asking highly specific questions about interdimensional physics and the proper way to denome a garden. I imagine Ford, wherever he is delighted to have a protege who actually gets it, instead of just thinking he's a kook. Mabel, on the other hand, she's embracing her creativity and individuality. She's not trying to solve the mysteries of the universe. She's trying to decorate them. Her summer experiences, the whole Mabeland thing, the grappling hook, the sweaters for every occasion, it all solidified her sense of self. She knows who she is, and she's not going to let anyone tell her to be less sparkly. She's probably designing a whole new line of sweaters featuring various cryptids, or maybe a series of graphic novels about her adventures. She's probably still trying to set up her friends on dates, but now, with a slightly more mature approach, maybe even taking into account their actual preferences instead of just who she thinks would look cute together. And I guarantee she's still throwing epic parties, just maybe with less risk of accidentally summoning an interdimensional demon. The Pines Family Fun Day probably involves a lot more glitter now. The townspeople of Gravity Falls, bless their weird little hearts. They're rebuilding. They're traumatized, sure. I mean, who wouldn't be after a giant triangular demon try to turn your reality into a giant puppet show? But they're resilient. They've always been a little off-kilter, so a little bit of cosmic horror isn't going to stop them from living their lives. The diner is still serving questionable coffee, the gift shop is still selling overpriced trinkets, and the mayor is still, well, the mayor. They're probably telling stories about Weird Mageddon, exaggerating the details, turning it into another one of their local legends. Remember when the sky turned red and the eye bats flew around? Good times. And the memory of the Pines family saving them, that becomes part of the town's folklore. They're not just those weird kids who stayed at the Mystery Shack anymore. They're the heroes, the ones who stood up to Bill Cipher. That's a pretty good legacy to leave behind, even if it does mean everyone in town now expects you to solve all their problems. The Pines family, the whole extended clan, their bond is stronger than ever. That summer solidified their relationships in a way that years of normal family vacations never could. Stan and Ford, they're still brothers, still bickering, but now there's this underlying current of respect and affection. They've faced down a literal apocalypse together. Dipper and Mabel, they're inseparable. They're still twins, still annoying each other, but they've got this shared experience that no one else can truly understand. It's like they're part of a secret club, and the membership fee was almost getting their souls eaten by a dream demon. They're probably still getting together for holidays, and I'm sure every family gathering involves at least one story about a monster or a magical artifact. And I bet Stan still tries to con them into doing chores. But now, they're wise to his tricks. But here's the thing about Gravity Falls. Even after Bill Cipher is gone, even after Weird Mageddon is over, the weirdness doesn't just pack up and leave. The lingering effects of Bill's presence, they're still there. Maybe it's a subtle shift in the local ecosystem, or a residual magical energy that just makes things a little bit stranger. New, minor anomalies and strange occurrences continue to manifest. A gnome that's a little too articulate, a lake monster that's a little too friendly, a talking squirrel that's a little too philosophical. It's never anything on the scale of Weird Mageddon again, thankfully, but it's enough to ensure that Gravity Falls retains its unique character. It's like the town has a magnetic pull for the bizarre, and even a cosmic reset button can't completely turn that off. It's just a fundamental aspect of the place. Dipper and Mabel, they occasionally discuss returning to Gravity Falls, not just for visits, but for longer stretches, maybe for a summer, maybe for a gap year, maybe even to live there permanently. The town has a hold on them, a gravitational pull of its own, if you will. They know there's still so much to discover, so many secrets hidden in the woods, so many strange characters to meet. It's their home, in a way that their actual home never quite was. They've grown up, they've seen the world, but the call of the supernatural, the allure of the unknown, it's always there, drawing them back to that little town in Oregon. And who knows, maybe one day they'll take over the Mystery Shack, not as a tourist trap, but as a genuine research centre for the unexplained. Or maybe Mabel will turn it into a giant glitter museum. With these two, anything is possible. So we've got a town that's slowly recovering, two kids who are growing into their roles as supernatural investigators and creative geniuses, and a lingering sense of weirdness that just won't quit. The legend of the Pines family, the ones who saved Gravity Falls, that's etched into the town's history. They're not just characters in a story, they're part of the fabric of the place. And even though Bill Cipher is gone, the threat of cosmic weirdness, of things beyond human comprehension, it's always lurking just beneath the surface. It's a quiet promise that the adventure is never truly over, even if the cameras have stopped rolling. But it does leave us with a few lingering questions, doesn't it? What exactly happened to the remaining pieces of Bill Cipher's statue? Did anyone ever find them? Are there other interdimensional beings out there, just waiting for their chance to cause chaos? What about the other journals, the ones Ford mentioned, but we never saw? And what did Fiddleford McGucket eventually invent that was even crazier than a memory gun? Did Stan ever pay off his debts? And what about Blendin Blandine? Did he ever get his time-travelling act together? For our next deep dive into the truly bizarre, we could explore the intricate, often contradictory, lore of Steven Universe. Or perhaps the surprisingly dark and complex history of Adventure Time. Or maybe even the completely unhinged reality of the amazing world of Gumball. Okay, so we've seen a town built on secrets, a family fractured by them, and a universe-threatening demon who, honestly, was mostly just really annoyed by a bunch of kids. From the initial, baffling arrival of the Journal 3 author to the ultimate, still unresolved question of what exactly a Grammoblin is, this entire saga has been a relentless escalation of cosmic weirdness, all centered around a small town in Oregon that frankly deserves a break. We've watched the Pines family, in all their dysfunctional glory, stumble through interdimensional rifts, defeat ancient evils, and somehow manage to stay mostly intact. It's a testament to their resilience, or perhaps just their sheer stubbornness, that they navigated a timeline so utterly riddled with paradoxes and unexplained phenomena, and that in all its baffling, glorious, and occasionally terrifying detail is the complete Gravity Falls timeline.